We've got 3 of our 5 so far.
We are streaming, just so you know.
Okay, that's what I was. That's what I was wondering. I tried to open up the stream and it was a Public Works guy. So okay, we're ready. Welcome. This is the special study session of City Council to interview strategic plan consultant candidates. We have with us a panel from the city, including Mayor Pro Tem Anita Seitz, Councilor David DeMott, Councilor Lindsay Smith, Deputy City Manager Barbara Opie, Teresa Bocco, our policy and budget analyst, and myself, Cody Bluer, the assistant to the city manager. Our first set of consulting teams are from Barry Dunn, and we'll go ahead and get started. So welcome. I'm going to have the city panel go around and introduce themselves real quick, and then we'll ask you to do the same. Seth, if you want to lead that. And then following that, there's a series of 8 questions that the city's panel will go ahead and answer also in a similar order. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem, if you'd like to kick us off.
Thank you so much, Cody, and thanks for all your work putting this together. My name's Anita Seitz. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem for Westminster. Thank you for your application and look forward to hearing from all of you.
Hi, welcome. My name is Councilor David DeMott. Looking forward to hearing what you guys have to offer.
Hi all, my name is Lindsay Smith, Councilor for Westminster, and I too am looking forward to hearing your proposal and what you have for us today. Thanks for being here.
Hi, I'm Barbara Opie. I'm Deputy City Manager. I'm one of 3 with the city. I have worked with the city for quite a while and worked on the strategic plan process for over 20 years. So I have some experience here and look forward to hearing about your proposal.
And good afternoon. My name is Teresa Bocco. I'm a policy and budget analyst, and my team assists with coordinating the city's citywide strategic plan update report. Good to see everybody. Thank you.
And I'm Cody Bluer, the assistant to the city manager, of the pleasure of liaison between staff and city council and working on some special projects throughout the organization, including the strategic planning process. Welcome. Seth, if you want to take it away for your team, that'd be great.
Sure, happy to. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today. We will have brief introductions, then we look forward to answering your different questions. So again, Seth Hedstrom, and for this project, I would be the project principal, ultimately having overall responsibility for the services we provide to the city and making sure our team has anything they need from our firm or resources. Have been with the firm now for 12 years and spent those 12 years consulting with local governments all across the country. Closest to you all, I led our work with Fort Collins, Loveland, currently Aurora, and also Tri-County Health Department. Michelle?
Hi, I'm Michelle Kennedy. Good to see you all. I'm proposed as the project manager for this engagement, and we appreciate the opportunity to interview for this project. We are really excited about the potential of working with the city. I won't say a lot about myself. I really want to focus on first maybe some distinguishing factors for our consulting team. Just like you all to know that I've been facilitating strategic planning in government sector for 23 years. It is the thing that I am most passionate about in the portfolio of consulting services that I'm engaged in. Before the remainder of our team members introduce themselves, I'd just like to highlight a couple of things that I think are distinguishing for Barry Dunn. One thing we can do is bring fresh perspectives from our work across the country. We work in municipal governments in every state in the country. We've been doing this for a really long time. We also have a multidisciplinary team in our local practice area that represents every single aspect of city government. And so we can draw on that bench of people at any point in the project to bring in those perspectives. We can build off of the work that your previous facilitator did in your last strategic planning process. We have some context. Mitch will elaborate on this, but we recently completed a project with the Westminster Police Department. And as Seth has said, have done numerous projects all over the state of Colorado, including neighboring communities to Westminster. The other thing I'd like to highlight is that we have very recent experience conducting strategic planning in a full virtual setting. That's including employing social engagement tools like Social Pinpoint to get broad community engagement, as well as using applications that we bring into the Zoom environment to replicate an in-person planning session as closely as we possibly can. So we've been doing that on a couple of strategic planning projects currently. We have a member of our team that is Barbara Heller, who has known your Parks and Rec director for many, many years. So we bring that context to play. And then finally, I'd like to close with my introduction by saying that if you contact our references, they will tell you our approach is highly personal and hands-on, and that we give high attention to learning what makes your community unique so that we can customize our methodology and give you the exact results that you want. So from there, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Mitch Weinzettel.
Thanks, Michelle. I appreciate that. And hello, everyone. Nice to see you. As Michelle alluded to, first of all, my background is in policing. I spent 27 years as a police officer, 17 years as a police chief in 3 different departments. And as Michelle indicated, actually, I was the project manager for the full study of your police department that was conducted about 3 years ago. I worked very closely for about 8 months with the department and looked at a lot of the things that were going on in Westminster, including your projected growth, downtown development, and a whole host of other pieces and parts that were really central to the police function. My role within Barry Dunn and what I've been doing for the past 6 years is conducting studies of this nature, operations and management studies of public safety agencies across the country, and working with a number of places nearby, Golden, Colorado, Westminster, obviously Wheat Ridge, and currently doing a bunch of work in North Glen, Colorado. So again, we do have a lot of context in your local area, but we also, and I think Michelle pointed this out too, and I think it's really relevant, is that we have a lot of current context around the country with communities that are dealing with the new normal and with the struggles and trials of functioning government in our times that are presently in front of us. So again, my role on this is to be a subject matter expert. I do have a lot of background in strategic planning and leadership and organizational management, in addition to just the public safety world. So I look forward to the opportunity, should it avail itself, and appreciate the chance to visit with you.
And I'll go next. My name's Michelle Dotson. So within Barry Dunn, I'm a senior manager. I've been with the firm for about 6 years now. And just to keep our intro short here, I, like Seth, have done some work with other municipalities in the state, including the cities of Brighton and Boulder, as well as Pitkin County. My role on the project is proposed as facilitator, so I'd be working closely with Michelle Kennedy and the rest of the team to facilitate sessions, work with staff, and produce our deliverables. So last but not least, I think I'll turn it over to Charlene.
Thanks, Michelle. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Charlene Kirangosi, and I am proposed as the research analyst for this engagement. And really in this role, besides maintaining active engagement throughout the project, I will assist in document review and analysis, and also assist both Michelle's in the strategic planning process as well as community engagement. And within Barry Dunn, I am a consultant with our local government practice. So we work exclusively with local government agencies. And like Michelle stated, I was actually involved in the Brighton, Colorado project with her as well. I look forward to talking to you all more and learning more about the opportunity of working with you all. Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Mayor Pro Tem, would you like to start?
I will. John Falls. Apologize. So I have the first question, which is, can you briefly describe your strategic plan development process and the final product? How do you get the ideas and goals down to a prioritized list?
I'll start with that question. So our process, we use a facilitation methodology that is really focused on producing consensus and producing consensus efficiently. We think this is really important to apply it to your project because you have such a short timeline. The other thing, if you choose to do a community engagement process, which we saw was up to the council to ultimately make that decision, we saw that you've done that in the past. We can also do that quickly through the use of the Social Pinpoint engagement platform, which greatly truncates the amount of time that you have to spend planning and executing on a community forum or a community engagement process. But we start with interviewing the key stakeholders. We like to understand how council members feel about where the organization is, where the city is. We like to interview executive leaders and get all of that input before we do anything else in terms of designing the process. If there's going to be a stakeholder engagement, an external stakeholder engagement or community engagement portion, we would do that next using the information we gathered in the interviews to inform that process. Sometimes we survey employees of the city simultaneously with that, so we can gather all the information on a parallel track. What we end up doing when we're done with all of those data points is we build a rich visual environmental scan and stakeholder assessment that informs the entire planning process. So we give you the current picture of how your stakeholders, all of your stakeholders view the current environment of the city, what they believe are the emerging trends, what they believe are the most important priorities, what their hopes and dreams are for the city, and put those together in a very visual, compelling slide deck that we use to begin the planning process with the elected officials and the senior leadership team. In facilitating that group, we use that facilitation methodology that I mentioned, which is the Institute of Cultural Affairs, which is consensus-based. And through walking through the steps of that methodology, we are able to get the team to consensus to a small handful of priorities that are actionable and that you can also measure. So I'll stop there and see if there are any follow-on questions to that.
I think just to make sure you have the opportunity to answer all of the team's questions, I'll save my follow-up questions till the end.
Okay.
So I have the next question, which is a multi-part question. So describe how you view the role of a consultant in strategic plan development process. What aspect of strategic plan process do you allocate to governance and council protocol discussion, formulation, and check-in? How do you facilitate differing opinions or priorities and still develop a strategic plan and/or governance protocols that city council can be unified behind?
Okay, I'll start with the role of the consultant. Your consultant should be your partner in this. We bring the methodology and the experience in conducting strategic planning, but the ideas that go into the plan are yours. And so our role is to be a partner with you, to be a trusted advisor to your process, to execute on a process that will get you to the end result, and to make sure that the ideas of every participant are considered and looked at and thought about and processed. So we're a partner and we're there to run your process in a sort of unbiased and objective manner. We can bring our perspectives from other places, but we don't tell you what should go in your plan. We help you arrive at those conclusions about what's right to be in your plan, and our process and our facilitation style and methodology supports that. In terms of your governance process and those discussions, we think that those are important to have collaboratively to some degree with the executive leadership team in the city. There needs to be an understanding of mutual expectations between the city council and executive leadership and vice versa. So we like to at least start with that. And then we like to do time alone with the council to really go through and work through what kinds of policies and protocols are going to be right for us, and covering all the facets. I think we submit an example of what we've done for other local governments in creating those. The part about opinions is that you eventually have to arrive at consensus. And so our process and the methodology that we use is really designed to do that. It's rare when we actually have to have our participants take a vote, but there's always the opportunity to do that if we need to. Another thing that we've used before is if there's debate or there are too many priorities and too many opinions about what the priorities should be, we have set of criteria that we use. It's a scoring criteria that we give to the participants and have them actually score based on some weighted criteria so that we can get to a final solution on priorities if we're having trouble getting consensus in the normal way. Did that answer the last part of your question as well, or do you want to repeat that? Do I need to go back and revisit the end part of your question?
I don't think so. I think I think it gets to most of the question. I think it's just around how you deal with the varying personalities or opinions in the room, but also making sure that there's a part in there about focusing on our protocols and stuff, because I know in the past that's been something that you get new council members on, and making sure that everybody is part of those new protocols is something that we want to make sure that you guys have a process for. And to me, that really spoke to how you would cover all that. I don't know if any of my colleagues want any more color around it, but I think you covered it in my mind.
I think I'd like to just interject a very specific example of a previous client and engagement to show you how this process really does work. So one of the most challenging strategic planning engagements that I was involved in was with Lake County, Illinois, which at the time had 23 county board members. It now has 21, almost evenly split between Republican and Democrat members. And getting them to consensus on a set of strategic priorities for their very first strategic plan was challenging. But we were able to use the criteria that I mentioned and the scoring process to do it in a way where they were able to work in small teams and coalesce. And then at the end, what scored the highest ended up getting the attention. And that was great, because with 21 members and everyone having a different opinion, at the very starting point, we had to employ some tools like those. With a smaller council, that might not be as much of a problem, but we do have those to fall back on if we need to.
Great, thank you. That's a good example.
So my next question is, please share your views with respect to the value or lack of value of long-term consultant-client relationships when it comes to strategic planning.
Well, we think there's great value in that. It depends a lot of times on where an organization is in its strategic planning process. You know, you can make an argument for both, that it's great to have fresh perspectives coming in the door, and sometimes that's really important. However, there is a benefit in building a long-term relationship with a strategic planning consultant, because they know you, they know your organization, and they understand your evolutionary process. So, for example, I facilitated the strategic planning process for Lake County, Illinois for 10 years. And an example now is a current client of ours, Barry Dunn, facilitating strategic planning in the city of Beaverton, Oregon for almost the same length of time. So the benefit is that you really get to know the organization, you know where they're headed, you have relationships established, and sometimes it makes it easier to continue to up your game and evolve the process from cycle to cycle.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I'm next. So I have a two-part question, so I apologize. It's going to be a good one. So let's see. So first part one is, what is your process and timeline for developing and delivering follow-up materials to the strategic plan session with City Council? How do you assure that the city's expectation will be met and that the materials are distributed in a timely fashion? That is, we're targeting the end of March this year. So that's the first question.
Okay, so the timeline. So the good news about the facilitation methodology that we use is that the documentation is being produced real time, and we have applications that we can use within a Zoom setting, for example, to show all of the work on the screen real time. So that allows us to document things much more quickly. We will be able to produce the results from those sessions very quickly within a few days. our project schedule is set up to meet your timelines, and we carefully thought through the tasks that were going to be required and how long that they will take. And I'd just like to ask Michelle Dotson to chime in here from her deep project management expertise. Anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I think just to add on, really from the start of our process, if we were to be selected from the very first meeting with you all, we're going to start to dig into what has already been established. So the previous materials are going to guide us so that, yes, we would bring that fresh perspective, but we're also going to capitalize on what's been done to date and use that just to make the process that much more efficient. So when it comes time to those points in the process where we really want to sit down and have some elongated conversations, we have the appropriate time to do that with your stakeholders. So we always have the obvious objective of the strategic plan at the end of the day, but our team's objective is to make sure that you're staying within scope, on schedule, and on budget while also meeting that end goal.
I would also just close that to say, we agree with you on the front end what the strategic plan is going to look like at the end. So we start with the end in mind. We create whatever the format is, and it might change a little bit, but if we know what that is on the front end, then we facilitate to that end result.
Thank you. Second part of the second question is, do you have, so obviously, just to follow up, do you have the time and the resources to do this work? Do you have the capacity within your team right now to be able to take this on, particularly in this condensed window?
Absolutely. We would not have proposed on this if we did not feel that we had the capacity to do this. And that's why we brought a 5-person team to this project, so that we have the capacity to do the work. We recognize, your time frame is really short. It's basically 2 months. And so we've got the team, and we also have additional resources in our local practice area that we can draw from for extra muscle and extra bodies if we need them at any point in the project. And those are all team members with local government expertise.
Could I ask a follow-up on that real quick? Just because we've just recently, the group that we had no longer had capacity to do this. So it looks like you guys have a little bit deeper of a bench, but could you maybe hit on how, say one of you decides to take another opportunity with another company, how was it documented who you were working with, so somebody, can as seamlessly as possible hop onto the project and work with us if we work with you?
Well, fortunately, it doesn't happen often, which we're happy to say, but it does happen. I mean, nature of consulting, certainly folks take other opportunities. So in some prior projects, when that's happened, our best insurance has been a team approach like we do here, so that we're not having a single point of failure. And, to kind of echo Michelle Kennedy's comments, we see a lot of opportunities like this, and we take a hard look at our availability, and we know we're not going to get very far overstretching and overcommitting. And so in this case, we felt comfortable and still do, and obviously are pretty conservative in our planning.
Great, thank
I
you.
would say that the team that you have here in front of you has been with Barry Dunn for a while, so I don't see any of us going anywhere in the short term.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, I have the next question. Who will be actually working with the city throughout this process in retreats, meetings, and in developing the actual strategic plan? Thanks.
So the entire team here, but in terms of the facilitation part, Michelle Dotson and I are set up to be the co-facilitators of that process. And she and I together will be writing the strategic plan, along with all the support from Charlene on the data gathering and the assistance that she will provide to us in doing interviews and administering surveys if we do them, administering the community engagement input from the social pinpoint site should we choose to use it. So the people that you will see probably the most often are Michelle Dotson, myself, and Charlene, and we may have Mitch playing a role too, depending on our capacity issues. So we'll see what you all end up deciding to do. And if you do a community engagement process, you'll probably see all 5 of us.
Thank you. I have a 2-part question. First is, what is your definition of a strategic plan?
A strategic plan is a living, breathing document, and I'm sure you've heard that before. But a strategic plan should be your North Star guidance. You should be able to make all of the decisions that you need to make as an organization using your strategic plan as the guidepost. One of the things we noticed when we were doing our homework for the interview and really looking into what we could find out about you as a city, we noticed that your strategic plan was one of the guiding principles and criteria that you used when you were considering budget reductions. And that was at the top of the list. And we were really impressed to see that, because a lot of times organizations don't use their strategic plan to make decisions about resources, but that's one of the best uses of a strategic plan. It should be designed in such a way that it's open enough that you can add to it if you need to along the way, but not so open that you don't make concrete progress on the things that you say that you want to do. The plan should also be worked on a regular basis. And by that, I mean progress should be monitored. It should be coming before City Council on a regular basis. Staff in departments should have action plans that are tied to the strategic plan. So we see it as your North Star. Do any of my team members want to add to that? I'm doing all the talking here and I don't want to be.
Michelle,
Mitch?
just say that we recently completed an operations and management study for North Glen Police Department, very similar to the one we did in Westminster a few years ago. And as a result of that, there were around 50 recommendations on process improvements and strategic priorities that they needed to establish. They've re-engaged us and hired us to work with them on an ongoing basis to help them stay on track and make sure that they're making consistent progress. So as Michelle said, it's a plan and it's a living and breathing document, but you also need to work the plan. And so that's a big piece of it, to make sure that it actually filters into your decision-making processes on big decisions and small decisions as it relates to the priorities of your community that you set through the plan.
That was a good start to my question, Mitch, which is, can you please provide an example of tangible successes maybe one of your communities has had after you delivered that first strategic plan, the final version? So,
if you don't mind me jumping in, Michelle, you can go talk to Chief Carlson if you like. But I do know that, we delivered a project about 3 years ago with around 50 recommendations to the Westminster Police Department. And I do know that a large portion of those were acted on and continue to be in progress. And I know that council and city management was highly involved in that. So, that's an example directly with your city. But again, work in other neighboring communities in North Glen in particular. One of the pieces that we're promoting in North Glen right now is a community co-production policing model, which is a reform model to get police departments more connected and collaborative with the community. And again, work on that is ongoing with the city of North Glen as they're standing up a police advisory board in that capacity. So, our clients, fortunately, and Michelle Kennedy spoke to this, we provide, you provide the purpose, right? You provide the understanding and the priorities. We facilitate that. And that's really consistent across the work that we do. And because of that, they're actionable items. The recommendations that come out are things that you can actually do and execute. And to the extent that you need additional assistance or guidance along the way, we're an ongoing resource should that opportunity need to occur. So
I would just add a small amount to that, to say that we strongly encourage and often are engaged to help our organizations that we create strategic plans for build implementation plans. Your strategic plan is nothing if you don't implement it. And so we focus, as Mitch said, on the strategic plan itself being highly actionable, having progress measures in there that help you track so you can get to success, but help you think about implementation planning as part of the strategic planning process. And we've also been engaged to facilitate the creation of implementation plans. So our guidance is always, you have to have an implementation plan that goes along with the strategic plan.
Thank you. This is a question for the city's panel. Are there any other questions that haven't been asked before Mayor Pro Tem asks the final question?
Well, I would like to go back to my question. I do have a follow-up question. Michelle, when you mentioned, building and interviewing all key stakeholders and external stakeholders additionally, it sounded like some frontline employees if we chose to go that route. I'm curious, what is your approach for identifying who those key stakeholders are? How do we make sure that we don't just hear from the folks that are already empowered, who already know how to have their voices heard, and reach some of those other portions of our city where we have folks who maybe aren't as enfranchised?
That's a great question. And we've actually been encountering that a lot in the last several months. So we actively, at the very beginning of the project, will ask for who hasn't been involved. Who are your employees who are not typically asked to participate on teams to work on certain projects? When it comes to the external stakeholders, I'll give you a specific example. And if you contact our reference in Milton, Georgia, they will tell you this. There was an expectation set at the very beginning that we reach disadvantaged, underrepresented, underserved populations as part of our environmental scan in that project. And we worked extensively with the staff in the city manager's office to identify those stakeholders. And we took that further out by contacting stakeholders and asking them to give us recommendations. And we were highly successful in that engagement in bringing folks to the table who hadn't before. The one way you can get employees more involved, if you can only do so many interviews, right? At some point, it's just, you'll blow your budget on interviews. We really like to get employees engaged in a survey. And there are ways to do surveys that make it really palatable for employees to participate in those. So we see it again as a partnership with the city team to give us that first wave of stakeholders. And then we might use that group of stakeholders to help us identify further stakeholders that will allow us to get at those populations who typically do not come to the table or haven't been invited to the table.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Councilor Smith.
Thank you. Just very quickly, the cost breakdown that you have, is that just for a virtual meeting, not in-person strategic planning?
I believe that's true, yes. Assuming a remote facilitation.
Okay. And so then the second, third year, did those have any kind of travel implications and costs? Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Before I go to the final question, are there any other follow-up questions or other questions you'd like to ask from the team, including non-elected members of the team? Okay. All right.
Mayor Pro Tem,
Please go.
to dig in a little bit more to the travel, because it seems like things are improving this year, thankfully, and hopefully that continues. But it would be interesting to be able to see those costs. So maybe not right now, but if we were, I think the preference when we did the last strategic planning is we tried to do it in person, and we just couldn't get there. So I think that it would be good for us to at least understand those costs.
Yeah, we'd be happy to do that as a follow-up. We'll follow your channels and look for your guidance on that. But, we would too. We'd like to do these in person, frankly. We've gotten good at doing these remote. I think this type of project, maybe hybrid, is the goal that we seek out. I don't know that your timeline would allow everything we'd like to do in person, but one of Michelle's most recent strategic plans, she did make in-person council meetings, for when it came to the one-on-one. So we had to do 95% of the work remote, but from some of those key interactions, we just want to have the opportunity to plan some of that more with you. But as far as the costs, we're happy to follow up.
Again, you could talk to our reference in Milton, Georgia, and they could talk about the hybrid approach that we did for them that was really effective.
Before I go on to the final questions, anyone else? Don't want to step on toes. Okay. So I pick a member of the team, but my final question is simply, Why should we work with you?
Well, I think I made a lot of those points up front. If I knew you were going to ask that question, I would have waited. But I think we'll reiterate some of those. I'll say a couple of words and then I'll ask my teammates to jump in. I think again, it is the expertise that we bring with all the different bench strength we have in our local practice area. 23 years of my experience doing strategic planning in government sector, work all over the country, bringing in fresh perspectives, recent experience working within this COVID environment and figuring out creatively how to do the work virtually and have it replicate as much as possible in in-person progress, and bringing a lot of tools to bear to do that. I'll stop there and ask my teammates to throw in.
Well, I think to repeat a point Michelle made earlier, I mean, strategic planning in 2021 is not like strategic planning in recent memory. And so I think, hearing some of these real world firsthand examples, we think is a benefit to the city as we try to navigate, not just the way in which we conduct the work, but just the challenges that are facing your community. Like all communities, they're different now. And we've recently worked through some of these similar challenges. So hopefully that came across in some of our remarks.
One other thing I just would like to add, and again, it's been mentioned, I think, but the breadth and depth of our team is substantial and of our firm. Barry Dunn is a large firm. We've been around for a long time, but our government practice area is, well immersed in this work across the country. And so we do bring perspectives from a lot of different places. And we, as Michelle Kennedy mentioned, we have the resources to bring to bear. If anything comes up that's unfamiliar or fresh or new, we have a variety of resources we can tap to add value to what we can bring to you as a firm and help guide you to the path that you're trying to identify for your strategic plan.
And if you can't tell, we're really passionate about this work. It matters to us to plan the strategy of local governments and to be a part of that. We're really high touch. We're really personal. We're really interested in what makes you unique. And we would be privileged to do this work with you.
As we have a little more time, I'll ask for my colleagues' indulgence to allow me to ask one more question. Is that okay, everyone? Okay. You talked a lot about priorities kind of coming forward through the process and that really efficient move to a consensus. Can you describe working in divided councils where consensus is often very difficult to get to? And how do you approach that? How do you help break through that kind of gridlock and do so in a way that is respectful of everybody's roles and the agency that they were given by the voters?
There's a few different techniques. One is establishing an understanding of the facilitation methodology and the process and how it works and what it's designed to do. That's a beginning point. The second is setting up some ground rules and some mutual expectations, as I mentioned earlier, that the council can agree to. Third is to establish trust with our team and the council and the executive members of your leadership team in the city at the very beginning and really hearing what everyone has to say, particularly in the one-on-one interviews. We like to do one-on-one interviews with council members in particular, because then we can front end feed the process with their ideas, but we can also tease out where the differences are and be prepared to facilitate to those when we actually get to your weekend retreat where that work happens. We have a lot of experience in facilitating when there's disagreement. We've done a number of processes. I'll give an example. One was at the city of Beaverton, where there was a very big disagreement between the mayor and the police chief and the community development director about the siting of City Hall and where the location for where they wanted to place a new public safety facility. And they were at loggerheads, and coming in using that very powerful facilitation methodology in 2 2-hour meetings, we had them in agreement. So I remember I said kind of at the beginning, you have to place trust in the process, and the process is really designed to do that. And then again, if you can't get there, you get to votes. And if you can't get there, you use criteria and scoring when the opinions are too divergent to finally get to an end agreement. Do other members of my team want to, our team want to answer that?
Michelle,
Add
let
to
me
that
just
answer?
add, that it's about identifying interests and making sure that we clearly establish what the interests of the group are. And then, as Michelle mentioned, it's about valuing everybody's voice in the process too. Our methodology creates a safe space for everybody to share, and one in which we value the comments that everybody brings to the table. And at the end of the day, as she indicated, the goal is to create mutuality and to find a space where everybody agrees, you know what, based on all the interests expressed, here's the space where we're going to satisfy everyone's needs and of course the needs of the community. So, but it is a process, and it does sometimes, the bigger the issue and the bigger the split, it can take a little more time to work through, but the end result, they speak for themselves.
Not seeing any other green lights. Thank you so much. I'm going to let you know just quickly what the next steps are. Council is interviewing 6 different teams today. And at the end of the day, we'll debrief and provide next steps. It could be as soon as tonight, they make a recommendation to their colleagues on City Council, or at the later date next Monday, February 1st. So you'll hear from us one way or another by midweek next week.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We appreciated this opportunity.
Thank you.
Great to see you all.
Well, have a great afternoon, and we will look forward to speaking with you soon. And the city panel, we have a short 5-minute break.
Bye, everyone.
Thank
Thanks
you
again.
so much.
Hello. We'll be with you shortly.
Hi, Cody. I'm Jacqueline. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Good. We just had a 5-minute break, so we'll be back right at 1:15.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
How you doing?
Doing well, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Perfect timing. We're all back. Welcome, Jacqueline and Sam. We're excited to have you with us. We're going to proceed with our next round of interviews. I'd like to introduce you to the city's panel. We'll do a quick little round robin, and then I'll ask you to introduce yourselves, and we'll jump into a series of 8 questions. We have 40 minutes, and the questions will be asked in the same order as introductions are made. So Mayor Pro Tem, if you would please kick us off.
Hi, my name is Anita Seitz, and I'm the Mayor Pro Tem for Westminster. I have been on City Council here for 7 years.
I am Dave DeMott. I'm one of the city councilors. I'm just finishing up my 3rd year.
Hi, I'm Lindsay Smith, counselor, just finished up my 1st year, going into my 2nd. So thank you for being here.
Hi, I'm Barbara Opie, Deputy City Manager. Thank you very much for joining us. I've been with the city for a little while now and have been involved over the years supporting City Council with their strategic plan efforts.
And good afternoon. My name is Teresa Boko. I'm one of the policy and budget analysts, and we work with Ms. Erb regarding the strategic plan update that's done twice a year by the organization. Glad to see all of you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm Cody Bluerb. I'm the assistant to the city manager and have the privilege of working as liaison between staff and council in a variety of ways and projects. And one of those is the strategic planning process. It gets us involved in the community and brings all of us to the same table. So looking forward to this interview.
Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and ask oh, I'm so sorry. Why don't we let you introduce yourselves? Apparently, I've not had enough coffee today. My apologies.
Okay, good. I'm Jacqueline McCrae. I'm with Management Partners. I'm a partner with Management Partners. Just a little bit about myself, and I know that you all have our proposal and have read it. I've been with the company almost 23 years. My background is in urban planning, and also I am a generalist manager. I worked in a few local governments before joining Management Partners, and have worked on to date, I was just counting them up, 25 strategic plans. And so, and Sam and I have teamed up together along with Claire Coleman on a number of those. So I'm happy to join you today.
I'm Sam Lieberman. I'm a a senior manager with Management Partners. I've been with the firm 11 years now, and am a generalist as well with Jacqueline, but have a particular focus on budget and financial matters, as well as facilitations, both for process improvements as well as strategic planning facilitations, in addition to an extensive background doing survey work in conjunction with our organizational assessment projects, as well as our strategic planning work. And we're happy to be here and looking forward to your questions.
Great, and it looks like Claire is not here today, so I will go with my first question. Briefly describe your strategic plan development process and the final product. How do you get the ideas, goals down to a prioritized list?
Sure. So our strategic planning process begins with gathering information and listening to the leaders in the organization, that being the counselors and the leadership team, also city staff, and then also listening to the community and understanding what their priorities are for the future. What we propose to do, and the proposal that is really, our proposal that we would solidify with you, if we were lucky enough to be hired, is to first start off with interviews and listen to you and understand what's important to each one of you individually. We would then take those themes and concerns that come out of those interviews and use those to prepare surveys to the staff so that we hear from the organization in Westminster, and then also hear from the community in Westminster. Now, we know that you recently completed a community survey less than a year ago, and so we'd work very carefully with you about how we would structure that community survey and what we would want to focus on so that we update those opinions of the community, because the report was pre-pandemic, and so we may want to really understand and hear from the community about if any of their opinions have changed, if they have new priorities, if they have new problem areas, or if their concerns are generally the same. And so we would then take that information, and I'll let Sam give you a little bit more detail about that. But we would take all the information that we hear and begin to distill it. So we start at a very high level and we start distilling the information so that by the time we get to a workshop with the counselors, we would have also assisted staff in preparing an environmental scan and have a wide range of information that we would then present to the counselors. And our workshop begins that distilling process. And one of the ways that we do that is that we prepare, prior to the workshop, a briefing document. We call it a workbook. And it has, and it compiles together all the information, everything that we've heard, all the information we found out. Staff and from the community. Also, the staff's environmental scan, which looks, of course, at projections and trends for the future. And we present that to the counselors in this workbook and ask them to start considering what we have compiled, the information that's been compiled in a very logical and easy to understand format. And we use the workshop then to help them arrive at consensus. We know that you recently updated your vision statement, so that's a given. There's consensus there. We know you don't want to reaffirm that, but we would help you reaffirm your vision and values, as well as strategic priorities. We know you have 6 current strategic priorities for the future. And then based on any, revised strategic priorities, then help you develop goals and strategies for the future. I'm going to let Sam talk a little bit about the survey and how we would design and deploy that with you.
Thanks, Jacqueline. Yeah, we will conduct interviews, as Jacqueline said, with council and with staff, but we feel it's important to get input from as broad a group of city staff as possible. And so the method that we would use to do that is to develop a survey tool that we would send out in conjunction with your staff and to determine a method to get as much input as possible. And that survey really is an extension of what we would learn through individual interviews with an emphasis on learning what staff's priorities for the future would be, in addition to their thoughts about the strengths and opportunities that exist in Westminster. We would do a similar survey with the community. We would, as Jacqueline said, work with you all to design the survey to either update some thoughts that folks had from the most recent community survey that Polco NRC did, in addition to some questions that we would want to know for the strategic planning purposes. And so again, those are ideas around really thinking about the next 2 to 5 years in Westminster, and what are those things that the community wants to see occur. What are their priorities? What are the projects they want to see? Again, we will work with you and staff, probably Cody, to identify the best ways to distribute the survey. And I know that NRC mails it. We would likely do a number of methods, including an online survey, including making paper copies available where necessary, and then trying to identify the methods that will attract the greatest number of participants. And so that might be, posting it on websites or using email addresses through utility billing customers that you might have, or water customers, or using your social media, of course, to push it out and really drive engagement, and really we'll want to think about with you all, because you know your community best, what are some of the ways that we can hear from the folks that we don't hear from often, and how can we reach them, because their voice is important as well. And once we have the results of those surveys, again, we will distill that down, identify any key themes that emerge from those surveys, and summarize those for you in the briefing document, so that prior to the workshop that Jacqueline mentioned, you're prepared and know everything that we've learned, the summaries and themes that came out of the interviews with elected officials, the summary and the key themes of what we learned in interviews with department heads, and then again the summaries of both of those surveys. So you really have an understanding of what we learned, and you can take that into account when we come together to develop the strategic plan and identify really council's priorities and goals and objectives.
So one of the things that we skipped over and that we know is really important to you is, planning and facilitating. We know that you've done community summits before. And so we will work closely with you to, once we have the survey data back, facilitate most likely in the world that we live in, a virtual community summit. I would love to come to Westminster. I think that in-person engagement is, bar none, the best that there is. But if, if the world as it is continues, we may not be able to travel to Westminster. Colorado may not want folks from Ohio there for a while, but we'll see. We hope that things will get better and that we could do and plan with you some sort of community summit and engagement that would be based on kind of drilling down and further exploring the information that we learned from the community survey. If we do it virtually, what we've learned in our experience is that certainly virtual participation allows a lot more flexibility. So even if we're there in person, we may, open it up so that people can join us virtually. And we would have, perhaps we would meet with your boards and commissions. Perhaps we would have a couple of open, community sessions, one in the morning for people that come and have that time available, one in the afternoon. They may be on a Saturday, but we would want to work very carefully with you to plan out the best times to have those so that we gather and attract the most people. And then once again, that's built into the briefing document. And, we try to make our workshops with the leadership team and the counselors engaging. Once again, we've done them in person, we've done them virtually in this COVID world, and they both work extremely well. We can do, depending on, what your city attorney says, we may be able to have small groups, or we may have to keep all the counselors together in one session. We'll lean on you to guide us in the direction as we design that workshop. But then coming out of the workshop, we will prepare a draft strategic plan document that really articulates, the policy direction, the goals and strategies. And then we will prepare with you an implementation action plan so that once the document is adopted, then, the leadership team, the staff is ready to hit the ground running with regard to the priorities, the work that needs to be done, and who's assigned to do it, along with success measures. And that is a long answer to your first question.
And I'm going to add to it, Jacqueline. I do just want to reiterate that, and Jacqueline mentioned that we start, broad and bring it down. And it's really that workshop where, because we've learned so much and we have an idea, frankly, from you all through the individual interviews, what your priorities are. We have ideas from the community and staff what their priorities are. We'll have, essentially a list of priorities, and we will then work with council and facilitate your discussion to coming to a consensus on what the top X number of priorities should be. And of course, we don't want to make it too many because staff needs to be able to get the work done and focus, but that's something we'll work with you on. So it's really in that workshop where we are working with you all to call the list of priorities to what you really want it to be.
Thanks for that answer. I have the next question, and I think you kind of answered some of it, but I'll read the whole question and you can fill in the gaps where you think is necessary.
Okay.
So it's a multi-part question. So it's describe how you view the role of the consultant in the strategic planning or development process. What aspect of the strategic plan process do you allocate to governance and council protocol discussions, formulation, and check-in? How do you facilitate differing opinions or priorities and still develop a strategic plan and or governance protocols that City Council can be unified behind?
So the first part of the question is the role of the consultant. And so, as our name states, we're your partner in this endeavor. We work very closely with you, the elected officials, as well as your leadership team there in Westminster. to design a process that meets your needs and your goals. We're doing the bulk of the work with your direction, of course. The one piece of our proposal, as we prepared it, where we would need, staff would be pulling together most of the environmental scan, because you all have the data, and we would provide guidance on that activity. And then we will incorporate that into, our presentation for the workshop. But that is our role. That's how we see ourselves. We see ourselves as, your partner in this process, guiding the work, facilitating with you the decision-making process, bringing together disparate points of view, and helping you come to consensus on those various points of view. Sam, what did I miss?
Yeah, I think Jacqueline, you nailed it. It's not our strategic plan. It's your strategic plan. And our role and our job is to first, and really the bulk of what we do is information gathering so that you guys have that knowledge, but then really facilitate your discussion of what you want your priorities to be. And because we've done all that pre-work and all that information that you've provided to us and that we've gathered, it really allows for a robust discussion. And, we get the question a lot, David, about, differing opinions and how do we get, how are you ever going to get us to agree? And it's always, I say always because I haven't run into it yet. We always end up with a consensus of X number of priorities, and it's through that discussion, and because you've heard from all these various sources what everybody else is thinking and what they want, that you're able to, everybody feels included, right? And they feel like they've been heard, and they feel like the process has been, again, inclusive. And so we're really really skilled, frankly, at guiding the discussion, so you guys can come to your consensus as a council. And that's for priorities for the future. That's for any governance processes that are on the table as well. It's a facilitated discussion that we're able to guide folks towards consensus, and we feel strongly that we're pretty good at it.
Great, thank you.
My next question is, please share your views with respect to the value or lack of value of long-term consultant-client relationships when it comes to strategic planning.
So I think there are pluses and minuses with long-term consultant relationships when it comes to strategic planning. And it's certainly the desire of the community, which works best for them. Sometimes, a community will want to hire a consultant that has worked with them in the past because they both know each other and they feel comfortable with one another. And other times, the council may want to hire a consultant that will come in with fresh eyes and have a fresh perspective on what's happening in the community and help them to see that, see what's going on in the community from that different perspective. And so, there are positives and negatives to both. And certainly, your elected leaders have to figure out which is best for the city moving forward.
Thank you. I've got the next question for you. It's a two-parter, so I'll give you the first part.
Okay.
What is your process and timeline for developing and delivering follow-up materials to the strategic planning session with City Council? How do you assure that the city's expectation will be met and that the materials are distributed to us in a timely fashion? That is, right now, our target being the end of March this year.
Yes, that's a tight timeline, and so we work with tight timelines a lot. What we the caveat that we have with, especially with a timeline as tight as yours, and our work plan, is that when we start the project, we have a kickoff meeting. And that kickoff meeting is really to go through our activities and to build in, to construct that timeline so that we get to the endpoint that you want. We get finished when you say we need to be finished. One of the hallmarks of, of our work here at Management Partners, that, we keep our commitments to timelines and the delivery of our products, our deliverables. And so the only caveat that I would have, friendly caveat, is that tight timelines cannot withstand hiccups in the process. And so we will help you anticipate any potential delays, either, they could be any types of delays, but in a timeline as tight as this, we want to make sure that we are able to stay on the schedule. And so that means that when we send you things to review, then we know that we're going to get them back in the time that we need them. And when we have, survey links that have to go out, we know that they'll go out in the time that they have to go out. But if there are hiccups, then we'll need to be flexible. We'll need to kind of reassess our course and make any modifications very quickly, so that we are communicating clearly with each other. And so that's once again a long answer to that first part of your question. Sam, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, Jacqueline's right. We will ensure that we meet your timeline, presuming that there are no hiccups. I would caution just that the one element of what we have proposed that may suffer due to a tight timeline is the ability to get broad community feedback. That would be the hardest part for us due to a short timeline. That's not to say that we can't get community feedback in a short timeline. We absolutely can, but it limits the amount and likely the breadth of community feedback that we can get. And we will strive to get as much as we can in the time that we have to be prepared to provide you with the information that we learn in time for the workshop. But you can see working backwards how much time might be left for those types of things. But I just want to make sure you're aware of that going into it, which again, we would reiterate during a kickoff meeting, like Jacqueline said, when we get on the same page in terms of when we'll get things done and provide it to you.
Great. Can I just confirm that I'm reading the proposal correctly? Right now you have the project start date potentially in the next 2 weeks, but then the strategic plan workshop would be somewhere between April 19th and 30th. Am I reading that correctly?
So
I just want to confirm that I have the right timeline.
So I'm looking through I see here.
Page 13 of your proposal.
Yep. You are looking at the right thing, but again, those can be squeezed so that we meet your timeline. And just looking at this now, we would squeeze the gather information. We would squeeze by a week probably. We'd get the environmental scan done quicker. We would more quickly prepare for the strategic plan, and we can get the strategic plan workshop done on your timeline. And what I mean by that is we can get the workshop done, and we can have your your draft priority areas and goals and objectives, and provide those to you guys and to staff in a draft form for us to create the nice looking strategic plan document and to finalize it and all that. We might move into a little bit past your timeline, but in terms of the elements, I think we can certainly meet the timeline to get the workshop done and have the elements of the strategic plan done by then.
Okay, great, thank you. So my second part of my question was actually, do you have obviously the time and the resources to do this work? Do you have the capacity right now within your workload to take on this project?
We do have the capacity within our, among the three of us to take on this project and complete it as we've indicated within your timeline.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have the next question. I think we've covered it, but I'll ask and let you elaborate if there's anything to add. Who will be actually working with the city throughout this process in retreats, meetings, and in developing the actual strategic plan? Thank you.
It will be, right, right, myself, Sam, and Claire Coleman, who is not on the call with us today. It will be the three of us from beginning to end.
Great, thank you.
Sure.
Would you mind specifying what, if there's specific roles that you each would be taking on? You know, it's Sam doing the facilitating and Claire's, you know, doing the report preparing, just some sense of that would be nice.
Sure. So in terms of, you know, managing the project, that's my role as the project manager, but Sam and I will be conducting interviews with you. Sam and Claire will be preparing the surveys and deploying those and doing the analysis of those surveys. Sam and Claire and I will be facilitating the workshop. All the deliverables will be, you know, the surveys, the briefing document, the strategic plan, the implementation action plan. The three of us will all have a role in preparing those jointly. We also have a peer review process so that all of our deliverables go through an internal peer review process before it leaves and goes to the client. And so that is an internal process, but nevertheless, they are a part of our team, the peer review team. And then facilitating the implementation action plan workshop would be Sam and I. So yeah, now the three of us are doing it all.
Okay, great. So I have a two-part question, and I'll just ask them both. It might be easier to answer that at once. So the first part is, what is your definition of a strategic plan? And the follow-up to that is, please provide an example of tangible success one of your communities has had after the delivery of the final strategic plan.
Sure. So I'll start off and then Sam can also add his reply. So strategic planning is a discipline. It is a discipline that community leaders and their staff engage in collectively with the residents and business people of the community. The elements of the strategic plan, the vision, for example, is really a collective vision that really applies to all of Westminster. Every resident in Westminster should be able to see themselves in that vision. The mission, on the other hand, really tells, and directs local elected leaders, the leadership team and staff in the day-to-day work of the organization in carrying out that vision. Accompanying that vision are what we like to call core organizational values, so that the values guide your behaviors and the way in which you make decisions and the way that you serve residents and customers of the city of Westminster. So you got vision, mission, values. Your strategic priorities are really those high-level areas that you want to devote your resources to over a period of time to achieve the vision. They are the key elements of work that then roll out and are articulated as goals and action steps. And so those elements become a policy document that, you know, members of the community, as well as the counselors and the staff, then use to guide their allocation of resources, you know, budget resources and staffing resources over time. We like to help when we're assisting, you know, communities in the development of a strategic plan. We also like to have some really, you know, focused and defined success measures so that everybody knows what success looks like, what's anticipated, what's expected to come out of, you know, all the goals and the actions that are articulated in that policy document, so that when decisions are being made, we know that in Westminster, you know, you have a discipline. You've been doing strategic planning, you know, for 18 plus years. And so you know that good communities, successful communities, really take strategic planning seriously. They use it to budget, they use it to guide the work of the organization. And one of the examples that we have, that Management Partners has, is a local suburban community, the city of Montgomery, Ohio, that we've helped with strategic planning. Wow, I think for 15 years now, we've helped them do a strategic plan every 5 years. And we have seen their community develop in a positive way. There are actually places in the community where there wasn't, you know, a defined city square that they said 15 years ago they wanted to have, and then 10 years later it happened because they were focused and diligent about following that strategic policy, and they backed it up by allocating resources to those goals related to it. So I'll stop now. I could go on and on.
And I don't have anything to add. Jacqueline took the example out of my mouth.
Okay, that's good. Good teamwork there. Our next question before our final question is just an open up to the city panel. Were there any other last minute questions or something that came up that you want to ask? And I just want to call attention to time. We have about 6 minutes left. Mayor Pro Tem, I saw your hand, and Councilor Smith, I saw yours as well.
Councilor Smith, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I just have a quick question. Does your budgeting process include that travel out to Colorado? It wasn't clear in that documentation, so I just wanted to see if, I know you talked about having a in-person meeting, but does your budget include an in-person meeting?
I believe that budget does include an in-person meeting. Sam, can you double check that and let us know?
Yeah, while I'll double check, you might want to ask your next question, but I will double check.
So this is Anita. I found the portion of your proposal interesting, the Facilitate the Implementation Action Plan workshop. So this sounds like a second workshop from the strategic planning workshop. The ones that's to me, the way I'm reading the timeline here is that somewhere between March 8th and the 26th, we'd have the strategic planning workshop, and then you'd present us the finalized plan, edited and clean and pretty, and there would be then an action plan workshop, implementation and action plan. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that mainly for the the leadership team for the city, or does that include council? What does that fundamentally look like?
Sam, do you want to address that question?
Yeah, so it will be for mostly the leadership team and staff, and what we'll do with them is take the goals and objectives that you identify through the workshop and that you've confirmed in the strategic plan, and then we will work with staff to identify each action step really that they need to take to achieve that particular objective. we'll work to identify a single person that's responsible to ensure that it's achieved. And that's not to say that that person will do all the work, but we know that there needs to be one owner for a particular project, because if there's two, nobody's going to take control. We'll help staff prioritize the objectives, and that will be either timeline and we'll get it done by X date, or we'll get it done in this priority order. And then lastly, we'll work with staff to identify potential resources needed to achieve those objectives, and performance metrics, so that council knows and it can be reported back to council the progress on achieving those objectives and achieving the goals set out.
Thank you.
And just to add, that budget is inclusive of travel, Councilor Smith.
Thank you, Sam.
Okay. If there are no other questions from any of my colleagues here, looking around, none, I will ask the final question, which is simply a wrap-up question. Why should we work with you?
So there are a number of reasons why you should choose Management Partners. We are all, first of all, we all come from local government. We understand and love and know local government. That's number one. We take a collaborative approach with you. So we're going to work very closely with you, your project team, as well as the counselors, to meet your goals for the project. We have extensive experience. We've completed well over 15 strategic plans, and that's just one of our business lines. And we know organizations, local government, cities, counties, and special districts like yours. We have a proven methodology for completing strategic planning. We deliver projects on time and on budget. And so even as tight as this project is, once we come to agreement on dates and the timeline, we are going to meet them with you, so that at the end of the project, you have your strategic plan and you have your implementation action plan. We'll tailor this to meet your needs. We don't come in with any preconceived ideas. We come in with a proposal that we will then tailor to meet your specific needs. We take pride in our work. We've already talked about our internal peer review process. We're focused on implementation. We want, at the end of the day, not just a strategic plan document, but we want to leave you with the roadmap for success, and implementation is a key part of that. And so that's why we've included the implementation planning workshop as a part of our proposal. And we love what we do. So we really would value the opportunity to partner with the City of Westminster.
And we're fun.
Thank you very much. Just in the way of next steps, we, City Council, these three representatives will have a debrief later on this afternoon after they finish a total of 6 rounds of interviews. And tonight, we'll be making a recommendation to their colleagues unless they have some outstanding questions, in which case that'll be postponed till next week. So at the very latest, you should hear from us by the middle of next week.
We appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your time. Hope you have a lovely afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Panel, we have a 5-minute break, I guess 4 minutes, 2 o'clock, please. Hello, Julia and Michelle. We just took a quick break, so.
Okay.
Hi there. Hello.
Hey, Anita. Hey. All right.
We're all back. That was quick.
Will I be able to share my screen during this, Cody?
I can give you those permissions. As
Thank
long
you.
as when you leave the meeting, please don't, leave for all,
Okay, gotcha.
All right, so just real quick, welcome and thank you for joining us today. We have 40 minutes of about 8 questions. So we'll quick go around the city's panel and introduce ourselves. And then we'll ask you to introduce yourselves. And Mayor Pro Tem Seitz will then kick off a series of questions that will also be round robin, and we'll finish up pretty efficiently, I hope. So Mayor Pro Tem, if you want to start for us.
Hi, my name is Anita Seitz. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem of Westminster. Julia, I've obviously worked with you in the past. I have been on council for 7 years.
Hey, Councilor Dave DeMont. I also worked with Julia before, been on council for 3 years. I'm pleased to see you today. Thanks for participating.
Sure.
Hello, I'm Counselor Lindsay Smith, and this is my first go around working and interviewing with strategic planning. I shouldn't say working, I had my first full year last year. So thank you for being a part of this, and thanks for being here.
Okay. Well, I'm Julia.
I say, Julia, we're going to get the rest of the staff introduced real quick for you. Although I think you already know most of us. Julia and Michelle, good to see you. I'm Barbara Opie, Deputy City Manager. Been with the city for a little while and worked with the city over the years, working with you guys actually previously with the strategic plan process.
And hello, my name is Teresa Boko. I'm with the Policy and Budget Department. Our team facilitates and coordinates citywide strategic plan update reports along with Ms. Erb. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Cody Bluerb, Assistant to the City Manager, and it's nice to see both your faces here today. So welcome. Looking forward to hearing from you.
Okay. Well, you know, one of the things we've all learned how to do in the last year is share screens in all formats. But I will say, I think GoToMeeting is, this one could be new. So I'm hoping I'm getting it right for you guys. But when I share my screen, everything goes away for me to see, but that's okay. So I just won't see your facial reaction. So maybe it's best. So again, I'm Julia Novak, and I lead the management consulting practice at Reftelis. And you all know me from the Novak Consulting Group, and you know Michelle and Ferguson. And Michelle leads the organizational assessment practice, which is one of our 3 practices as a group. We do strategic planning and facilitation, which is what brought us here today. Our largest practice is organizational assessment that Michelle leads, and then we also have an executive recruitment practice. So we place city managers and department heads. We're doing the local recruitment right now. So a lot of work with local governments. And you know, we're excited about the possibility of re-engaging with you. You know, we worked together for a number of years. It was always a pleasure. And so the possibility of doing that again is something that we're excited about. This last year, of course, a lot of things changed. So one of the things for us was we joined Reftelis. So the 3 practices that we've historically had as Novak have added to the management consulting practice at Reftelis. And in addition to the things that we have done, which we now do more of with more people, we also have a strategic communication work, and then a lot of work in finance and utilities. And so that is kind of the completeness of the company that we now are part of. And what we hope to do today is tell you a little bit of a story about, you know, why our firm would be a great firm to partner with on this work going forward. And for us, that's about the processes that we use, our people, and the passion that we have for the work. In terms of the type of work we do within this kind of strategic planning element, There's a couple of foundational pieces. One is work that I call governance work. It's working with a governing body to help them work well together so that you can lead your city and provide clear direction to your organization. The strategic planning and goal setting, there's the longer term vision and the framework for that strategic plan. And then there's the annual check-ins and updates of, when you have a new member of the governing body, what's important to them? How do we bring them into the process? What needs to change because there's new people? What needs to change because there's new issues in our communities, pandemics, whatever it is. But those are pieces of how we look at strategic plan and goal setting. We do community engagement, and again, one of the benefits of being with part of Raftellus now is we have a whole team of people who are strategic communications specialists. So in addition to the folks that or some of that have done community meetings in Westminster before, we have other team members that we can tap. And of course, we also do parallel work with organizations, with management teams in terms of helping them, once the council sets the direction, how do they operationalize that strategic plan? One of the things Cody wanted me to be sure and address was what might 2021 look like if we re-engaged with the city. And for me, the first thing would be to kind of get up to speed, do the one-on-ones with the council, meet you all again, find out what's important to you right now, especially in the context of the pandemics and the protests and all that we have been through as a country in the last year. We'd also do one-on-ones with the city manager and his key staff to kind of get a sense of things, and then probably a check-in with the department directors as well, just so we have a really complete picture of how things are going. I would imagine then we have all that input, we plan the retreat, and that could be just strategic planning. It could be there's a need for governance. It really depends on if it's a 1-day or 2-day retreat or 2 different days, which is something that we've done in the past. All of those first 3 steps really inform what the retreat cycle looks like. Generally speaking, I would say it's probably a little bit of governance, a lot of goal setting, strategic planning, and then working again with the organization on operationalizing it. It also could include community engagement. It's been remarkable to us that we can do the community engagement, community summits on Zoom, just like we used to do in person. It's actually quicker to get people to move from table to table because you just send them to a different room electronically and they don't have a say in it. So it's very efficient. So those are the pieces that we would put together in partnership with you to figure out what makes sense given where you are today and what we think you need after we've talked to you. Michelle?
In terms of the tools that we use for those re-engaging steps that Julia talked about, one of the things that we've also learned in this past year is that strategic planning hasn't stopped. And quite frankly, it's become even more important for organizations across the country as they deal with the impacts, in some cases, the unknown financial impacts or to be determined impacts of the pandemic and other issues that our communities are facing today. And so over the past year, our team has really ramped up our expertise in a variety of different engagement tools to use to really help organizations, to help governing bodies navigate the strategic planning process in a very different way. So we continue to utilize the services of graphic facilitation. For those of you who have been part of some of the strategic planning processes that the city has had in the past, we have utilized graphic facilitation. You see an example of that up on the screen now. And it is a really powerful way to engage people visually while in the midst of conversation. And it's a great way to really capture the sentiments of what people are talking about. We also use a variety of different polling mechanisms and surveys. And I think the important thing about all of the tools that we use is that they are similar to the tools that we used in an in-person environment. We've really adapted them and been able to advance them for the virtual environment too. So our team has become very proficient
at using virtually any virtual platform because every organization uses something a little bit different, and utilizing the tools that they have. Again, things like online polling. In person, we use clickers through Turning Point Technologies. We can also use a similar technology virtually to help organizations, to help groups prioritize. So based on the type of event that needs to be scheduled, we really draw upon these various different tools to engage people. We are sensitive to the fact that there is significant Zoom fatigue that people have if you have to be in a virtual environment. And so we structure the agenda and the actual event in ways that don't tire people out, but in fact actually energize people and really get people to engage, again, either in person or virtually. And the one thing that hasn't changed is our high quality deliverables. We firmly believe that within just a few days after an event, you all need to have a written record of the event. And therefore, we always provide those deliverables to you as quickly as possible so that long after the strategic planning process is completed, you have a well-documented, high-quality deliverable that really outlines the process that the organization, that the city went through.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is different about our deliverables, Michelle, you might agree, is that with Raftelis's creative services group, I think our stuff looks even better. So that's they're even more engaging, I think. Always is a good record, and now they've got a little sizzle too, so it's kind of nice. Go ahead.
In terms of our core team, so you've had an opportunity to meet Julia and I. As Julia said, she's had the opportunity to work with the city through past strategic planning efforts. I also assisted Julia in some of the strategic planning of the past, and I also worked with the organization several years ago and the management team through some of the strategic planning, but also through some of the leadership conversations that the group had. In addition to Julia and myself, we also have Dr. Nalbandian as part of our team. He is Professor Emeritus at the University of Kansas. Not only is he an expert in the theory of governance and public administration, he's also a former elected official. Again, those of you who have been on the council for a while may remember John. And we're also thrilled to have Sam be part of our team. Again, for those of you who have been in Colorado more than just a couple of minutes, Sam needs no introduction. And as Julia shared with me earlier today, after many, many, many years, dare I say decades, Sam still remembers Julia when she was an intern in Fort Collins years and years ago by first name. And so Sam's command of all things Colorado governance can be and will be a really critical resource if really the governance piece of the work is to be an important conversation for the council to have during this process. And as Julia mentioned, in addition to our core team, we have the full breadth and depth of over 120 consultants across the country that we draw upon as needed to help in any of our engagements.
Our practice in strategic planning is a national one. I have personally worked with city councils in I think 18 states and 100 jurisdictions and have done hundreds and hundreds of goal setting retreats and strategic planning engagements. And we've always had a big presence in Colorado. It's amazing to me how that has just kind of worked out. But the Front Range of Colorado, many of the jurisdictions are clients of ours, and even throughout the state. So we'd love the opportunity to bring all of that, both the national expertise and then our comfort level with working in Colorado, to you all in Westminster. The passion piece I think is important. I spend over half my weekends a year working with governing bodies because I love the work, and it's rewarding. It's kind of my little contribution to democracy. I love to see groups work well together on behalf of their communities, and it's that passion for good government, good governance, and a belief that local government really makes a difference in people's lives that really pours our soul into this work. So we appreciate the opportunity to kind of share this with you, and we're happy to address what other questions you have for us.
I have the first question, and I believe you covered this, but I'm going to allow you to expand or reiterate. Briefly describe your strategic plan development process and the final product. How do you get the ideas, goals down to a prioritized list?
Yeah. So, the process in the big picture is developing a common understanding of where we are. So answering that question, what do we know to be true today? Then finding the collective answer to the question, what do we hope will be true in the future? And then knowing what the end is, building a plan for the council to say, here's what our priorities are. And so, a lot of that, some of that conversation happens in the one-on-ones where we get to hear a little bit of each of you, from each of you, and we understand what you want to do individually. And we get that the only way to get anything you want done individually requires collective agreement on the part of the governing body. And so that's really what our retreat is about. It's about developing consensus around what is most important in this day to move things forward. So, Michelle mentioned we have the Turning Point technology, I think, with the clickers where you can prioritize anonymously. We do that online at virtual meetings. We do that in person. I'm also still a fan of sticky notes and sticky dots. And we do, the prioritization process in the room when we're able to be in the room together in that way. So, those are, the different techniques in terms of priorities. And I try to remind the group of the importance of getting as many people in agreement as possible. So 4 of you can move a mountain. You can do anything you want. You can direct the resources of the city to accomplish the goals that 4 of you want. And the majority rules, and that's the way our democracy works. It is stronger when 5 people are in agreement, or 6 people, and even 7. And so to the degree that we can work on the margins around, what if this, how about that, and get more people into consensus, I think it's very powerful in terms of sending a message to the community and to the organization that this really is what the council wants. Because sometimes when it's just a 4-3 vote and it's still the staff does whatever a 4-3 vote tells them to do, there's still noise sometimes on the part of the minority. And we want to make sure that it is clear direction and the organization doesn't feel like it's not really what the council wants and they could change their mind in 2 weeks because someone said something else. And so we really work to get you all to stand inside consensus and agreement.
I have the next question, and it's a multi-part question, and I think you certainly covered some of it in your presentation, but we'll go through and you can fill in the gaps. So describe how you view the role of the consultant in strategic plan development process. What aspect of the strategic plan process do you allocate to governance and council protocols, discussion, formulation, and check-in? How do you facilitate differing opinions or priorities and still develop a strategic plan and or governance protocols that the city council can be unified behind?
Okay. The role of the consultant is to create the space for the council to come together in agreement on how they're going to work together and what they're going to do. So the how and the what. And figuring out how much time the how or the what is going to take is different with every governing body. If I use my last week as an example, I spent 2 full days with one city council on nothing but governance. The next city council, I spent a half a day on governance and a day on strategic planning. And it just depends on what the group needs and what they want out of the engagement. So, one of the things that I will do is I will tell you what I think you need, whether that's a day on governance or let's not even talk about that. Let's just move right into strategic planning. So, we will do that and we learn that based on getting to know you during these conversations. So the balance of protocols and check-ins versus goal setting and strategic planning really depends on where the group is and how they're working together. At the end of the day, this is about doing both of those things. And so we figure out how to make the timing for both. I think you have to, I usually call that first part, like for example, in that 2-day retreat or a day and a half retreat where we did half a day on governance and a full day on strategic planning, that's about establishing the foundation. If we can work together to establish a foundation for good governance, then we build the strategic plan on that. It makes it a lot easier to come to agreement on what we want to accomplish if we've already agreed on how we're going to work together. And we've created an environment where we are respectful, where we appreciate differences of opinion and respect the decision of the majority of the group gracefully. Did that cover it all, Dave?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Multi-part questions, I have to write it all down, you know.
Me too. Me too.
My question is, please share your views with respect to the value or lack of value of long-term consultant-client relationships when it comes to strategic planning.
This is a trick question. Because like 7 years ago, I said, you know, every 5 years you might want to change it up. And then last year, you changed it up on me. So anyways, I have a lot of clients that I've worked with year over year. And if it's working, great. But if it's not working, then you make a change. And so, we have a number of different people. I'm not the only person that does council retreats. Michelle does those also. We have another person, Jennifer Teal, who does those also. Catherine Tuck Parrish does those also. So it's not just me. My sense is, and that why did I keep myself in this proposal? I liked working with you all, and I felt like we were effective together. And so I can, I feel like in this situation there is some benefit perhaps to getting to know the new people that I don't know, because I don't know everyone, and re-engaging with people who are familiar. So as long as the relationship is working, I think it's good. But it has to work for the council and it has to work for the staff. It really is a partnership. And if it's not, if it doesn't work, honestly, it's okay with me. I'm not, I'd love to work with you. If it doesn't work out, I hope you find someone that helps you, because that's what's good for Westminster.
Thanks, Julia. I have the next question. It's a two-parter, so I'll read you the first one and then I'll go to the second one. I think you already covered this, though. Again, I think you've highlighted a lot of this. What is your process and timeline for delivering and developing and delivering follow-up materials to the strategic planning session with City Council? How do you assure that the city's expectations will be met and that the materials are distributed in a timely fashion, i.e. we're shooting for the end of March of this year?
Okay. Well, so I think 5 years, at least that I worked with you guys, it was never more than a week that you got the report back. So that's, and I call this our practitioner's bias. I know what it's like to need that report. So that hasn't changed. You get it in a week. And so we'll work on that. And if you have a different expectation, we can talk about that too. But how do I know that we're meeting your expectations? We have a conversation about what you need and when do you expect it and how are we going to do that? So that to me is just part of good client relationships. I make sure we're checking in. I know what you need, and we get it to you in a timely way. And I think, your experience with us was probably pretty positive in that regard. You could call anybody, any of those dots on a map, and they would tell you the same thing, because that's just what we do. End of March. So you also know we book up, we get busy. But if you want to work with us, we'll work with you. I'll tell you when we're available and how to make it happen. And we absolutely have the capacity to fit you in.
That was the next question. Do you have the time and resources to do the work? Do you have the capacity with your workload and time?
Absolutely. We can, yes, by the end of March, we can do that. What I will say is, we have to work together on the scheduling, because there are a number of dates that are full. But there's some out there.
Okay, I have the next question. I think it kind of, you've covered it, but again, I'll let you speak to it. So who will be actually working with the city throughout this process in retreats, meetings, and in developing the actual strategic plan?
Well, it would be Michelle and I, and John and Sam and whatever other people we think make sense. So the one thing I would say is, if you all said, you know, Julia, we'd like to have Michelle do this, not you, that's great. She's awesome. If you want Jennifer Teal to do it, great. You want to meet her, you haven't met her. So there's not, I've put myself in here as the person, but it can be someone else if you prefer it. What you will know is who to contact and how to get a hold of us, and we're incredibly responsive, you know, text message, telephone, email, you know how to find us. So that won't be a problem. We'll also commit to it too. Like if you say you want Julia to do the retreat, then we work with my schedule and we do it, you know, that's who's going to show up.
Thank you. I have a two-part question too, also. So my first part is, what is your definition of a strategic plan?
Definition. Well, when I tell people what a strategic plan is, I say it answers those three questions. What do we know to be true today? What do we hope will be true in the future? And how are we going to get there? So a strategic plan is a common understanding of the existing condition, a shared vision for the future, the critical success factors, the things that must go well in order to bring that vision into place, and the strategies and tactics to accomplish those goals.
The follow-up to that is, can you provide an example of tangible success one of your communities has had after you delivered their final strategic plan? You know, help us understand how they've realized the strategic plan that you help them develop.
Yeah, so I would say realized or is realizing, you know, kind of working on it too. We did this really cool process with the city of Lawrence, Kansas this past year, right before we were supposed to have the final council strategic planning session the first weekend after everything went on shut down. Before everyone knew Zoom. And we were like, oh no, we could never do that on Zoom. We could never do that on Zoom. But up to that point, we had done all of this amazing community outreach, and Michelle had trained, was it 60 city employees in becoming a listening organization. So rather than having community summits, and we did do those, we had a couple of them. In addition to that, the city staff, went to church meetings, neighborhood association meetings, nonprofit meetings, the chamber meetings, the business community, all the places where people already gathered, and they did all of this listening. And the goal for the city manager, who was new in Lawrence at the time, his stated goal was for the organization to become a listening organization and for the community to recognize that city government wants to be engaged with people, and did in fact do that. And so it was an incredibly powerful process. We did end up completing it virtually, but just last week, so we completed it, I think it was May instead of March when we did the final session, and we did it virtually. But just last week, they were talking about, now we've done the strategic plan and here's what's next, and seeing them really intentionally focusing on implementation was very exciting. So I don't remember the specific project that they were writing about off the top of my head, but you know, when I see this evidence of implementation, that to me is success. And I will say that's a piece of the work that we do, is especially when we're with someone kind of year over year. A lot of our strategic planning projects are organizations we do work with year over year, and we get to see the progress that we're making. So that they are making, excuse me, and it's always great to see that. Whether another one, League City, Texas is one. I'll give you a quick example. this is our 4th year with them. We'll be down there a week from Saturday. And when they started, it was pretty chaotic. They'd had a change in form of government and really no strategic direction, a very kind of anti-tax type of a community, and they had huge infrastructure needs. And the 2nd year that we worked with them, they passed the bond to do all this infrastructure work. And the 3rd year, they really focused on, kind of making sure they were executing and implementing and developing better accountability techniques to communicate with the public. And it was really rewarding to see that. So just from a need perspective, to have that bond pass and see those infrastructure needs get cared for, and then see them very ably focus on implementation and accountability, I think was really great. Michelle, you probably have examples too. I don't mean to take all the airtime, so.
I was just thinking of one. I think on the theme of implementation, an organization that I worked with, again, similar to, as Julia said, an organization I worked with for 7-8 years. The council actually, because of the initial strategic plan, redesign their committee structure to really foster implementation of the strategic plan. And so their committees were based on the goal areas of their strategic plan, and the organization then was in some ways restructured around those. So, while the strategies and some of the tactics certainly would change over time, as priorities change, the community, as council priorities changed, as council members changed, the committee structure has remained, and that's one way of ensuring that the organization and the elected officials are continuing to be mindful of the strategic plan with every policy decision that's being made in that organization.
Great examples. We have kind of a broad questions. I'm going to ask the city panel if they have any follow-up questions or items that are left hanging. I see Mayor Pro Tem's hand up and Councilor Smith shortly thereafter. And then Mayor Pro Tem will follow up with one more question. Mayor Pro Tem, please.
Okay. So I just had a quick question. With the timeline that we've given, can you let us know what type of community engagement you would contemplate being possible and feasible? Would you want to gain new community engagement, or would you be looking to utilize some of our own surveys or own efforts? How would that, what would that look like?
So, my question, my answer around community engagement is a question. Because it's not just, we have to do community engagement, so let's have a meeting, right? It's, what do you want to learn? What question is it that you want to ask the public? And so when we know the answer to that question, we can do community engagement that's not just, hey, we did it, we had a meeting and this is what we accomplished. So, community engagement can look like a lot of different things. It can be upfront input for the council. It can be back-end feedback when you've done a plan, and I don't know what you need right now. So I think we would have to really partner with you to understand that, so we can give you the community engagement that will make this process meaningful this year.
Lindsay, do you want to go ahead?
Yep,
I'm sorry, Councilor Smith.
Thanks. For your budget, it doesn't have like an overall, just has kind of a breakdown of each person. But does that include travel to Colorado to have potentially, if we could, in-person meetings?
Yes, it does. And what I've told people this year, because we learned quickly, is the price is the same, virtual or in person, because it takes a lot more resources to do an effective virtual meeting than it does in person. And so it's the rates are there and they're inclusive. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
Mayor Pro Tem, you want to ask the last question?
Okay, I will go ahead and ask the last. This is our final question. It's really just to wrap up. Why should we work with you?
So I think our team is, and I'm not really great about being braggadocious, and I'm about to sound that way. We have one of the best teams that you could find that understands local government governance and administration. We are skilled facilitators, we are experts in process, and we are expert at helping organizations deliver on those processes. We're very good facilitators. We read a room, and we can help people have difficult conversations, and we know how to help groups work towards consensus. So it's right where I started. It's our people, it's our process, and it's our passion for doing great work.
Thank you.
Councilor DeMont.
Yeah, I just working with you guys in the past, I know, you know, I've sat through some of the presentations, and I know last year one of the things, to be frank, that we had talked about was some of us had gotten a little bit of the same presentation as far as like governance and the bridge and the things that your partner went through, and it's all good. But I think that, you know, as we went through it, we were curious, like I think some of us had seen it a couple times, to be honest. So that was one thing we did talk about internally when we were looking at who we were going to go forward with. I know that, you know, now the group's kind of changed and you have some more resources as far as with you merging with the other group, and with Sam being on, which I've heard Sam speak before. And obvious, like you guys said, if you've been in Colorado, he's a wealth of knowledge as far as municipal government. So I'm just curious, like with him coming on and the change, like what is some of the stuff that we could see that would be different if we go with you guys versus what we've seen in the past? Because I would find that helpful, because I think you guys were a close second last time when we decided to try something different, and that was part of the discussion. And so I think it'd be fair to let you speak to that.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And that's frankly one of the reasons why we have Sam on our team. You know, even John is very hesitant to give the same presentation to the governing body more than one time. He'll say, "I did this last year. Why do they need to hear it again?" So we're sensitive to that. And I will say, John, we've done some recent research, and he's kind of developed a new presentation on contemporary trends that kind of pours from the pandemic and a lot of the social justice issues that have been out there. So that's a piece that he would offer. But honestly, I think, you know, one, I need to understand what y'all need, and then figure out between Sam and John how to best deliver that to you. And of course, you know, Michelle and I also do. I do a lot of governance work without John. You know, I love doing it with John because I'm a student for life and I always learn something from him. But you know, part of it is figuring that out. So with Sam, what we have is a real depth of understanding of Colorado and what the context needs to be in terms of the guidelines for the council and operating procedures. And I think he can bring that to you all in a very competent way. So that's one of the benefits of having Sam on the team.
That's awesome. Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
And just in the way of process and to wrap up, thank you so much for your time today and answering all of our questions and for your presentation. We appreciate it. Council is meeting with a total of 6 different organizations today, and we'll finish that up this afternoon. If they make a decision this afternoon, they'll take that recommendation to their colleagues this evening. If there's a little bit more work to be done, references and whatnot, then that will be postponed until next week. So at the very latest, you'll hear from us early next week.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all, and best of luck no matter what, but we'd love the chance to work with you.
Thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
And we have 10 minutes this time. So
Team, this is Anita. I have to let you know I received a text during that I have to pick up my child from school because the other person who was planning on picking them up cannot. So I am going to call in. I'm going to ask if the first question, if someone else could ask it, because I don't want to be driving and asking and all of the things. So if one of you would mind asking, I could switch with one of you or what have you. So I have to pick her up at 2:57. So I'm going to probably call in so that it's not, you know, I'm not dropped off for a portion of it. So my sincere apologies about this. It's the first day back for in-person learning and already a hiccup. So
Councillor Demott, do you want to just take the first two questions so that we can make sure Mayor Pro Tem is safely muting? Great.
Yep, no problem.
Appreciate your help.
All right, and then I will see you all back at 2:50. So thank you so much. Hello. We have a sorry, we have a short break for 10 minutes, and so we'll be back at 2:50. I hope it's okay if you can just wait for us a few more minutes.
Oh, absolutely. No problem.
Thank you so much, and thank you for being so punctual.
Thank you.
Sure thing.
Hi, I just wanted to quickly identify myself. My name is Anita Seitz. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem. I have to join your interview via the phone for a portion of the interview. So I just wanted you to be able to put my face with a name and know I am listening. I'm on here as caller 00.
Okay, caller 00. Okay, thank you for introducing yourself.
Welcome back. And welcome all of you to this round of interviews. We're gonna just do a quick how-to and then and give you an update and get started. So welcome this afternoon to the City of Westminster's strategic planning process and the consultant interviews. We're gonna go through the city's panel of interviewees so that you can briefly meet everybody, and then we'll ask for each of you to introduce yourselves and follow that up with the same round robin questions by each of the members of this team. We will have one of our counselors, our Mayor Pro Tem, will be joining us by phone, so you won't see her face, but she will be with us, and we'll go ahead and get started. So I'll introduce her because I think her phone call just dropped off, but Mayor Pro Tem Anita Seitz, who's been on our council for a number of years and has been through a few strategic planning processes with us, is joining us by phone. And I'll pass it on to Councilor DeMott.
I'm sorry, was Mayor Pro Tem gonna introduce herself first since she's on?
I think her phone came off. I think she left
Okay.
her computer on and her phone just dropped off. So we'll have her, if she gets back on the phone, we'll have her go.
No problem. So I'm Councilor Dave DeMott, been on council for about 3 years. Look forward to hearing your presentation.
Hi, I am Councilor Lindsay Smith in Westminster, and I am going into my second year on council. Been through one strategic planning process, and this is my first time involved in the hiring process. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Barbara Opie, Deputy City Manager. I've been with the city for several years and involved in supporting the City Council over that time with their strategic planning process.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Boko. I'm a policy and budget analyst with the Policy and Budget Department, and our team coordinates the update of the strategic plan citywide in coordination with Ms. Erb. Thanks and welcome.
And I'm Cody Bluerb. I'm the assistant to the city manager and have the privilege of liaison between city council and our staff leadership, as much as well as some community involvement. And one of the special projects I get to work on is the strategic plan process and facilitating that work. So thank you for being here. If you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourselves, that'd be great.
Sure, I can begin and then maybe Alani and Gigi in that order. I'm Joy Lujan. I am the founder of Connected Realities. I'm a planner, facilitator, mediator, and trainer.
And I'm Alani Boykin. I'm also with Connected Realities. I've been with the team for about 5 years. Also an urban planner, community engagement specialist, facilitator, and process designer. Thanks so much for this opportunity.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Gigi Howard, and I am with Connected Realities and have been with Connected Realities over the last several years. I have worked in utilities government for a number of years, but I am an executive communicator, issues manager, public process practitioner, strategic planner, and very honored to be a part of your presence this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. And Mayor Pro Tem, I think, is on the phone now. Anita, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yes, my name's Anita Seitz. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem for Westminster. I've been on Westminster City Council for 7 years, and my apologies, my phone dropped the call momentarily, but I did catch the last introduction. So I do have your bios available to me though.
Okay, good.
So I'm going to go ahead and kick us off, I believe, with our first questions. So the first question that we have is for you to briefly describe the strategic plan development process and final product. How do you get ideas and goals down to a prioritized list?
I'm gonna ask you to repeat that one more time. Would you mind?
Sure. Nope, not at all. So briefly describe your strategic plan development process and the final product. How do you get the ideas, goals down to a prioritized list?
So process, product, and how do we get down to a prioritized list?
Correct.
Well, given that we've worked on countless strategic planning processes with with local governments, with nonprofit organizations, with community groups. It's always different, right? But the way that we plan, all three of us as planners are very intuitive planners. And so what that means is that we think the best plans come from a solid understanding of the issues. The best understanding of issues comes from deep listening to the stakeholders, right? And so the processes always look a little bit different because the issues are different, the stakeholders are different, the desired outcomes are different, the context is different. But in terms of the strategic plan process, development of the strategic plan process and the product, and then prioritization. The three of us are very deliberative in the way that we work. So it's like, okay, this is what this group needs. They're asking for these things. This is where we're trying to go. How do we make this happen? And so we are sort of feeling our way into it. And so if you look at our proposal, we've outlined what we think is the process, you know, that we would go through if we were doing a strategic plan update for City of Westminster. We just sort of felt our way through it. Here's what we think needs to happen, and then here's the next thing, and here's the next thing. And so what we've developed for you is what we think is like our best intuition of here's what we think you need. The product, Leilani and I are, in addition to being planners, we're sort of, I'm not sure what the gender neutral term for jacks of all trade is, but we do a lot of different things, right? And so we're also designers, designers by trade, but also we do all of the formatting and product creation. Prioritization is not ours. Prioritization belongs to the group. So what we can help groups do is figure out, like, how do you prioritize? What are the criteria you're going to use to figure out what you need to focus on? How do you figure out, you know, where to put your resources? You know, sometimes we develop a criteria matrix. Sometimes we're helping them just come up with different sets of parameters. I'm not sure if I answered all three of the process, product, and prioritization questions, but Gigi, and I wonder if you have anything to add.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a great foundation, Joy, and simply that we really do feel our way into processes. So a lot of the time, the very first part of us working with clients is really getting to know you, getting to know exactly what your situation is. In our proposal, you'll see that we do a situation analysis, and we take that very seriously. It's not just about how we are responding to a strategic planning process that any city will go through, but there's something unique about your situation, the departments that are part of the city, how the city council is interacting with the city, and for us to understand those relationships and exactly where maybe the most growth needs to happen, or where folks are identifying the most issues. You know, we're very flexible, and we simply will flex to where the group or the client or client and partners need to go. And so our processes are highly iterative and dependent on what you need at that moment. So it's what makes this work really exciting, and I think also what creates success for a lot of the clients that we work with.
And we also want to know where you've been. You know, we want to know, you know, what did the strategic plan look like before? You know, how has the community changed? How has the organization changed? How have the stakeholders changed to provide the input into those processes? So we do want to understand, you know, where you've been, and also where you're going and where you want to go. How do you measure success? How do you know when you've reached that success? We want to be a part of the process of developing those items, those goals, that strategy, so that we can help you know when you've reached those measurements or those successes.
Great.
David, have we answered your question?
Yep. Nope. I think so. I don't know if anybody, before we move on to the next one, as long as everybody's clear, I'll move on to the next question. So this is a multi-part question. And so the question is, describe how you view the role of the consultant in the strategic plan development process. What aspect of the strategic plan process do you allocate to governance and council protocol discussion, formulation, and check-in? How do you facilitate differing opinions or priorities and still develop a strategic plan and/or governance protocols that City Council can be unified behind?
Could you repeat the second part of that three-part question again? What
Yep.
aspect do we?
Just what aspect of the strategic plan process do you allocate to governance and council protocols, discussion, formulation, and check-in?
Or Gigi, do either one of you feel compelled to answer first? Well, go ahead, Gigi.
No, I was going to say, yeah, it's important that we understand who the stakeholders are, and as well as where council, is a part of that advisory process. We're making sure that some of the goals and the strategies that council wants to achieve as a community. So it's important for us as we go through, especially looking at a revised strategic plan, what are the inputs, and making sure that we follow the process for being able to go back and forth with, especially as Joy and Leilani had mentioned, it is an iterative process. And so, it's important when we look at, how the city of Westminster is governed, what is your governance feedback mechanism, how do we use that to continue to refine and hone those strategies, those goals, and make sure that we are keeping city council as a part of the process. But we want to establish that at the outset with you, in that initial meeting when we sit down and talk with you, we'll ask about, certainly what governance process is in place, what does that feedback mechanism look like, and then how can we continue to make sure that the right people are brought into the right parts of the conversation so that we can further develop and prioritize those goals and strategies.
Related to the role of the consultants, one of the things that we are all very highly experienced and trained planners, facilitators, coaches, we do a lot of different things. In terms of strategic planning or planning in general, like there's not a lot of ego involved in it for us. Like we bring the experience, we bring the process know-how, but this isn't our process. This is your process. And so we're going to offer our expertise when it's needed. We're going to be a gentle guide of the process, but we are not forcing our process on any community, any group, right? Like this is, we will co-create it with you, but this is yours. We are helping to figure out how to help you birth it. We will, bring the experience we have from other communities, other processes, other plans. But in terms of our role, it's to serve you. How do we facilitate differing opinions? Part of what I do is mediating. I do group mediation, so it's not just like a couple of people being at odds with one another. It's like we have this team that is experiencing difficult dynamics. They can't figure out how to do their work well if they can't figure out how to get along. Process is always the same. It's about getting people to talk about what they care about most individually. We're not trying to get anybody to change their mind or do anything different. The first part of the process is always just help me understand what is it that you need? What is it that you're concerned about? What is it that you're thinking? So getting them to articulate that and then getting everybody else to hear and understand each other's positions. So if there was, if they're on council, or I'm not sure among the strategic planning committee, if there were differences of opinion, that's the same kind of process. What is going on for you? What are the needs underneath what's going on? What are the stories you're telling yourself? What are the things that haven't been accomplished? What do we still need to look at? Get everybody to hear and understand one another. And then once everybody has an understanding of everybody else, the question is, how might we bridge this gap? How might we get what you need and what you need?
I'll also add that just in terms of our consultant role and the formulation of where council is invited and where all the other stakeholders are invited, very much like this is your process and you've been at it for a while. Like the city of Westminster has been doing a strategic planning process, and you've been updating this plan for a while. There is a ton that we have to learn from you. You have been facilitating or participating in this process for a while, and those are real lessons that our external experience will be helpful in this. We might bring some new perspective, but ultimately it is the experience that you've had, that staff have had, the community has had, that will very much inform the design of this process.
Thank you. My third question is, please share your views with respect to the value or lack of value of long-term consulting client relationships when it comes to strategic planning.
Gigi, you're on mute. It wouldn't be a proper meeting if nobody said that at least once.
No, I was actually saying, so you were asking about the value or lack of value with long-term relationships with consultants. So I was just sort of repeating it in my mind. And I think it's important, especially when it comes to the value of a long-term relationship with a consultant, if you feel, first of all, your needs as a body are being met, the needs of the community are being met, and that we have established a process that is respectful, of that. And I would say that is the role of the consultant, is to hopefully build that relationship. We are relationship builders. So our objectives at the outset is to hopefully have something where you, first of all, know that we are knowledgeable in what we're saying and doing, but then also that we hope to maintain a longer term relationship after that. But consultants have to adapt as well. And when I say a longer term relationship, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, whatever is appropriate, as long as the city feels they're getting the information that they need at such a time when you feel like your consultants are no longer listening, or your consultants are adapting a process that's been done before and aren't looking for new and innovative ways of doing it, then that certainly breaks down that consulting role. So our view is to always be, relevant, make sure you're pulling in innovative information, make sure you are using a process that meets your needs, and then making sure that we deliver on what we said that we would, year after year after year, or time after time after time.
I'll add to that part of the value is there's not as much learning curve every time we would come back, right? We have long-term clients that invite us in over and over again, and sometimes it's just like, hey, can you please come help us? We're having a problem with this issue. And we can just step in and know who the players are and know what the dynamics are and know what the history is and just be of immediate service.
Great, thank you very much. I have the next question. It's a two-parter, so I'll read you the first part and then we'll go to the next part. So what is your process and timeline for developing and delivering the follow-up materials to the strategic plan session with City Council? How do you assure that the city's expectations will be met and that the materials are distributed in a timely fashion? That is, we're targeting the end of March of this year.
Would you repeat the first part again, please?
Sure. What is your process and timeline for developing and delivering follow-up materials to the strategic planning process with City Council?
And when you say follow-up materials, what do you mean by follow-up materials?
If there's a report out that you provide, whether it's a summary of what happened at the event or whatever the materials that you provide.
We're looking at each other to figure out which one of us should go first. So the idea about developing the process and timeline, like this is something that we're going to need to develop with you all, obviously. We do have questions about the timeline that you've set forth. Part of I know that these are your questions to be answering, but I'm wondering, like, be asking, what is it? What is the constraint with the timeline? Like, is this the amount of time that you usually have for revisions? Is this a particularly compressed timeline? I wonder if you can help us understand the timeline.
I'll jump in and council members, other staff members can join in as well. Traditionally, the process, part of this is that the strategic plan obviously leads and helps in the development of the city's budget. And so our charter requires that the budget be adopted by the end of October. So the summer is spent very much so with a lot of the detail, utilizing the strategic plan to help guide that discussion and help to guide the priorities. And so we've got that component. Our timeline is a little bit more compressed. We actually been trying to move it up because over time with different consultants and different challenges with city council members and staff member calendars, we've gotten later into the summer, which obviously then makes it more difficult to turn things around. And we want to provide sufficient time for community engagement and all of those variables that council looks for in that process. So this year probably is a little bit more of a condensed timeline than what would traditionally be ideal. But we are trying to kind of reset our clock and move us forward a little bit so that there is more time for council to get that feedback from the community, but also for staff to be able to utilize that information in helping truly put together a budget that reflects the priorities.
Okay, thank you for that. So then the process is we sit down in front of a calendar or a tool like Airtable, something where we can lay out milestones, lay out timelines, figure out what targets we need to hit by what timeline. It's, I mean, given the amount of work there is to be done, the amount of time there is to do it, and an undetermined or as yet to be determined deliverable, like this is going to be an intensive process for us and for whoever is working with us to just really say, here's what needs to happen. Second part.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Gigi.
No, so I was going to say, so the timeline that we submitted as a part of our proposal at the very end of the proposal was really kind of that condensed version. Our understanding as much as we can about the process that you're looking for. And again, we'll have to kind of fill in some blanks when you look at the general timeline that we proposed and that we put up with, because we feel that there will likely be some additions to that. Again, you had asked about, even summary reports after meetings and things along those lines. Obviously, we didn't put that in there, but that would be we would want to make sure that our lines of communication are consistently open with the team to say, hey, we've gathered this input or feedback from the community or the stakeholders. We would like to be able to share this. How does the team feel about that? And you may or may not, or you may say absolutely, or you may say no, not right now. But we would produce products that allow you to be able to speak from, here's the feedback that we received and gain an understanding of what it is that you're hearing from whoever that stakeholder group is. Sorry, Joy, you were saying.
I actually would love, Barbara, could you repeat the second part of the question? For some reason, I'm having a hard time hearing your line.
Oh, the other half of the question was, how do you assure that the city's expectations will be met and that the materials are distributed to council in a timely fashion? Again, are targeting the end of March.
So one of the things that we tend to do specifically in our kickoff meetings with clients is we outline communication protocols with you all. So a RACI matrix, we've adapted to a RACIO. So who's responsible, accountable, who's consulted and who is informed. And we just kind of adapt that among the project team so that we understand at for every task in the project, we know who to address the email to, who to CC, who really doesn't need this on their desk, because we want to streamline that communication. We also want to make sure that we're not flooding people's inboxes when they don't need to be. So we absolutely make sure that kind of communication infrastructure is set up with the client. And I think we can establish a lot of those in ensuring that we have the right recipient list at the right time, in addition to setting good milestones and such.
Right, recipient list, and then also a sense of who we need to communicate about specific things. So if we're going to hit council's expectations, we need to know what the council's expectations are very clearly, right? And so we would be having a conversation with folks to help us understand what are the things that need to be delivered to whom by which date, right? And that's a co-creation process. If we just say what it's going to be on the outside, we're going to miss things because we're not going to know. So I think we're sort of saying it under the surface here, but I think it deserves to be said overtly. Like, we would be looking for a very collaborative process where people are helping us to co-create timelines, co-create expectations. What kinds of deliverables do you need? This isn't just us doing something on the outside and feeding you something every now and then. It's very much a collaboration.
Okay, great, thank you. Let me give you the second part of my question, which is, do you have the time and resources to do this work? That is, do you have the capacity in your workload, and do you have the time?
Yeah, thank you for that question. We asked ourselves that too before we submitted the proposal, and looking at our other client obligations, looking at things going on in our lives, we did decide that we can commit to this timeline. One of the things that we've been talking about is if when we co-create this process with you, depending on how many stakeholders we talk to, we might want to bring in another team member or two to help us with like phone calls, stakeholder phone calls, interviews. But yeah, that was something that we weighed before we submitted the proposal.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I have the next question. So I think this kind of goes without saying, but we'll ask and let you respond. Who will be actually working with the city throughout this process in retreats, meetings, and developing the actual strategic plan? And if it is the three of you, if you could kind of designate your roles, that would be helpful. Thank you.
I giggle because we do things so collaboratively that I think sometimes it's hard to differentiate who's playing which roles. We are all coordinating. We're all, working on documents. We are all creating the planning process. I don't think we've identified yet which of us will take the project management role on this, but these are the three people who will be working on the project. It is the three of us intimately involved in all parts of the process. We're not handing this over to someone else. And like I said, if it turned out that we needed, because of the compressed timeline, other people to step in and help, we have I want to figure out how to say this in a way that doesn't make me sound snotty, but we're really careful about who it is that we bring onto our team, right? We don't just trust anybody. So a lot of the people who are on our bench happen to be retired colleagues or people that we've worked with in other capacities that, they've got time in their hands, but they've got a high level of expertise and we have a high level of trust in them. But so far, right now, it's the three of us.
And just to call out those roles, so you mentioned retreats, creating the strategic plan. So retreats, absolutely, there'll be facilitators. I think all three of us, and a number of times we outlined in our proposal, all three of us are part of the process design. That's a very critical way of how we work together and how we can ensure that, if we do have one or two facilitators for one meeting or one retreat at the outset, and then there are different facilitators, in the later periods of a process, there is still a continuity within that larger process. That's very, very important for us. And so there's also the plan development side, and Joy and I, she mentioned that we are both designers, so we are pretty well versed in all that is the Adobe Creative Cloud, and designing plans to be beautiful as well as communicable, functional. Yeah, absolutely.
And the other thing to highlight is, and I'm sure you all have seen this in our proposal, we're all very skilled facilitators. So as a part of the project management piece, not only do we have that as a part of all of our backgrounds and resumes, but we're also skilled facilitators. And so because we've worked with all levels, city council, commissioners, leaders of organizations, as well as I'm currently the president of the International Association for Public Participation. So always working through, making sure that we, are meeting those needs, whether it is a retreat. So it's just another emphasis on, we're very skilled at what we do and very skilled at being able to pull out information, and good at making everybody feel heard and giving others opportunities to feel heard. But as Alani and Joy had said, there will always be continuity in the process, but we will always make sure that you have a skilled person at the helm facilitating whatever the various processes are.
Thank you. We have just a couple more quick questions. So mine's a two-parter. One is, what is your definition of a strategic plan? And the follow-up to that is, can you give an example of a tangible success one of your clients has had and what that might look like?
Gigi, I wonder if you would take that. We've been having conversations recently that I think you would be well suited for this answer.
Okay, well, if you could please repeat the first part of the question. I heard the second part, but the first part of the question is the client.
First part is, what is your definition of a strategic plan?
Yeah, a strategic plan really should be a guiding document for how an organization or a municipality, how they strategize, how they prepare for the future of that organization or of that municipality. Strategic plans really should be the thing that your public can look at, your city council can look at, your employees can look at and be able to say, I know what the city is planning for. They're very proactive, they're visionaries, but I know what they're planning for the next 5 to 10 years. So it's really important that a strategic plan really kind of serve as that roadmap for how the organization prepares for what's coming. As far as a specific client,
I was actually going to mention, Gigi, in our proposal, we listed 3 examples. So I think it was Autism Society of Colorado was one of them, and then Continental Divide Trail Coalition, which is a multi-state group, and then Yuma Crossing National Heritage Area Strategic Plan and Transition Plan. And so I was thinking about Continental Divide Trail Coalition in particular in terms of their success. They were able to figure out what they ought to be working on, what they ought to not be working on, what kind of staff and what kind of resources they needed to implement their strategic plan goals, right? So it's not just a matter of, well, what do we want to do? The next part of what we did was to say, can you do this given your current capacity? Do you have the people? Do you have the resources to make this happen? And so I don't know to what extent that kind of thing comes into the conversations that you all are having, but definitely as we figure out, somebody asked earlier about how we develop priorities. Resources is part of how we do that. Do we have the resources that we need to be able to do the kinds of things that we need to do? Continental Divide Trail Coalition ended up being able to figure out where they could skinny up, right? Like where they could not spend so much time and so many resources, and where they needed to beef up. I'm not sure where I'm getting these words from, but I hope you know what I mean. And then to figure out how to leverage. So once they had a solid plan that was firmly based on the needs of their stakeholders that they were serving, based on their prioritization of what they were going to do, they were able to take that plan out and use it as a fundraising tool, right? Like I don't remember the number, it's written there in our proposal, but they were able to raise a significant amount of money for the organization and for the organization's work through helping people to see their strategic vision and articulate what their strategic plan was.
Yeah, one of the other projects, in addition to those that were named, and you'll see that in our proposal as well. But we also, as we're working with you through your strategic planning efforts, we also ask questions such as, how will this, and a great example is when I designed and developed the strategic planning process for Colorado Springs Utilities. And through that, we knew that we wanted to design and develop this process. We knew that it was going to be robust. We used a balanced scorecard. We used Kaplan Norton, talking about the governance processes and how do we work with city council and communicating information and things along those lines. But one of the things that through my work with many of the employees, what I was hearing from that community is, well, we know we have a strategic plan, but we don't know how we fit in. We don't know how the work that I do ends up getting implemented, or how it's even viewed or seen in this strategic plan. So one of the things with my training background that I was able to do, and again, you know, if you say we don't have time for that, obviously we don't have time for that, but it was a way of saying employees want to know how they fit in. People want to know how they can contribute. And so designing and developing training that allowed for the leadership and managers to be able to communicate that to employees. So again, looking at the cascading, that trickle down effect, you know, from the top of the organization where the strategic plan is designed and developed, how does it reach to the performance levels of the individuals in the organization? And that, first of all, the employees really appreciated that connection. And so, so we know that in this strategic planning effort, you know, that was one of the things that we said we could do, but we're also very responsive to, you know, what works for you, what are your employees asking for, what is your community asking for, and making sure that we build all of that into the tangible things that we deliver to the City of Westminster.
I'll just add that I know that you all have heard us say that we love facilitation, and it's a part of our, a deep part of our skill set. Strategic planning and strategic thinking are always in our brains when we are leading groups, whether they are pursuing a strategic planning process or they're trying to mediate conflict, or there's a community visioning process going, whatever, you know, the aspiration. There's always strategic thinking that we want to bring to the forefront. So as facilitators, we're constantly asking ourselves, like, how can we harness the collaborative strategic thought process for everyone in the room? And so what Gigi was talking about in terms of relevance, that is in our minds constantly when we are designing and leading meetings. If someone is at the table and not participating, what is the relevance of them being there? There's something that we need to do to make their time worth it and to make everyone else's time around the table worth it, or else why are they there? So if we are, you know, designing, co-creating a plan, it absolutely has to ring true for everyone impacted by it and everyone who should be empowered to help, you know, carry that vision through.
We have just a couple minutes left. I'm sorry, we're pretty tight schedule today. So the next question is just anybody from the city panel. Are there any follow-up questions? And then Mayor Pro Tem, if you want to end with your final question. Again, we just have about 3 minutes left.
Okay, with that, it looks like Councilor Smith may have a follow-up question.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. I was looking over your budget. It looks very detailed. Thank you very much for that. The one thing that I didn't quite understand was if it accounted for in-person meetings within your budget. So if you could kind of elaborate that.
Yeah, we made a couple of assumptions in the creation of the proposal, and so I'm not sure what page of the RFP it is. The two big assumptions are that there will be a strategic planning team that the city puts together to guide our work, and the other assumption was that all of the work would be done virtually in this COVID environment. If that changes, or if you desire something different, we have not accounted for that in the budget. We are all local-ish, so you know, it's not like we'd be traveling in from somewhere afar. So it would no, it's not in the budget now, and it would have to be factored in.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I did have a slight follow-up question, but I think you can roll it into the final question that I've asked all team members. So the first part is noticing that a lot of the groups that you have worked with are not just local municipalities, but not, you know, you have nonprofits, you have a lot of different types of organizations you have worked with. So I'm just curious about that. How do you see that as a benefit for us going through our process? Is there something that brings to the table that maybe someone who only works with local government doesn't have? And then secondly, the question that I actually answer or ask, and we should make sure you get an opportunity to answer since everyone else has, is why should we work with you? As a wrap up, why you?
Joy, I'd love to jump in on the first part of question. So our diverse experience, I think, my gosh, municipalities, government works with so many different types of players. And I know that all of us have had the privilege of working with folks who want to partner with government. They want to they want to enter into collaborative initiatives, and they're, you know, for various either regulatory or bureaucratic reasons, it's tough. It's really tough to partner sometimes with community organizations or grassroots folks. So most of my experience comes from grassroots community-based organizations, and I've spent most of my career in building capacity in those groups and also helping them to liaise with government. And so understanding the perspective of locally based groups, the passion, the drive that they bring, also, you know, the sometimes the slightly unproductive passion that they might bring to a table where they're just rightfully so many regulations that you all need to adhere by. So I think being in that space, being in that uncomfortable space of trying to mediate, but also just find opportunity for partnership to happen through dialogue is an incredible perspective and bit of experience that this team can bring.
I'll wrap up just really quickly in terms of why, you know, our diverse experience and what it brings. You never know where the lessons are going to come from. I love that we're able to pull lessons from all over the place to give to our clients. I think that's a really strong benefit. And then in terms of why you should work with us, I'll sort of end where we began, which is to say the best plans, the most effective plans are those that are based on deep understanding. The best way to get deep understanding is to listen deeply, to help people understand each other, to help people understand a system. We're very good at that, very good at really understanding what it is people need. So in terms of why us, it's because of who we are, not just how we do things, right? Like that mindset, that heart set of deep understanding, deep listening, that's something that I think that's a real asset in this team.
Great. Thank you so much. Just in the way of process, we really appreciate your time today, and council will have a debrief session following the next two interviews we have today. There's been a 6 of total interviews, and will, depending on how they feel, make a recommendation to their colleagues during the city council meeting this evening, or we'll postpone that till next week if they would like some more information before then. So at the very latest, you'll hear from us early next week.
Thank you very much.
Okay, yes, we appreciate all of your time.
Yes, thank you.
Best
wishes.
Team, we have 2 minutes.
This is going to be a long day of council virtual meetings.
Yep. You are not just whistling Dixie.
Sarah and Chris and Brenda, are you with us?
I'm here. This is Brenda.
We are.
I don't know if I for some reason can't figure out my face, but my voice is here. Just my face is not
there's your
here.
face.
Can you see my face?
Not yet.
Oh, do I just, okay, this is done, but I'm a little unfamiliar with GoToMeeting. Do I just press webcam? Is that the, oh, it doesn't like my webcam.
Hello.
Hello, Chris.
I had a box pop up on the right side that let me choose which camera input.
On the right side. I see it said webcam. Yeah, I don't see that box. Oh, wait, maybe this is it. Hold on. Oh. Hold on. Maybe it's that.
Or maybe in the settings in the top right.
Yeah, I'm there. Chris is there. His face is there. Well, that's good. I may have to do something else.
Brenda, the little wheel over there on the right, if you, at the top on the right, if you click on it, and then under webcam, it gives you, you can do a drop down there.
Yeah, I see that. Oh. Okay. Here we go. I can get no. Well, please don't hold up on my behalf. I do see that now, but I don't think it's showing up on your screen. So I'm now seeing it. Go ahead and start. I will work on this.
Welcome to this interview with the Strategic Plan Consulting Panel. Just in the process, we're going to go around. I'm going to ask the city panel to introduce themselves real quick, and then we'll hand it off and Sarah ask you and your team to introduce yourselves. And then following that, there's a series of 8 questions that will be answered by the city or asked by the city panel in that same round robin order. We do just have 40 minutes today. We are expecting to finish up with this group at 4:25, and I'm sorry for the tight timeline. We're squeezing some things into the day. So I appreciate it. Mayor Pro Tem, if you would like to start by introducing yourself. Thank you.
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name's Anita Seitz. I'm the Mayor Pro Tem for Westminster. I have been on City Council for 7 years now. Thank you for your application and interest in working with us.
My name is Dave DeMott. I'm one of the city council members here in Westminster. I've been on for 3 years, and welcome to the interview.
Hi, my name is Lindsay Smith, counselor in Westminster, and just appreciate you applying and being here. This is my first time going through the application process, and then my second year on council.
Hi, I'm Barbara Opie. I'm Deputy City Manager. I've been with the city for multiple years. I've helped support City Council in their strategic plan efforts over that time.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Boko. I'm a policy and budget analyst, and our team provides council with update reports on our strategic planning efforts, and I coordinate that with Ms. Erb. Thank you.
I'm Cody Blue Herb. I'm assistant to the city manager and have the opportunity to liaison with council and staff, as well as the community. So this is one of those great projects. I get to do all three at one in managing the strategic planning process. So welcome and thank you, Sarah, if you and your team want to make introductions.
Well, thank you all for having us. I'm Sarah Moss. Grew up in Westminster and went to both Ranham and Westminster High School. And when my family first moved to Westminster, my big dream was to get a job at Waterworld, as so many young people dream of. And I worked for Bob Owens, who many of you probably know. And one of my roles, it was in guest services. And part of that was helping lost kids find parents and help lost parents find kids. And there was a lot of emotion involved. And at the end of the day, everybody wanted the same thing. They just had some different ideas of how to get there and get reunited. But that job to me is pretty foundational for everything I have done after that. And that involves bringing people together to solve policy and political problems. The way I met Chris and Brenda, and I'll have them introduce themselves in a second, was through a group called the Bighorn Leadership Center. And Bighorn was all about bringing people together across the political spectrum to work on issues and not sling mud at each other, but actually work on real policy. And I think that's what sets us apart, is we have not just strategic planning, not just facilitation experience, but we get Colorado, we get Westminster, we get state policy and fiscal policy, and we've worked across the political spectrum, facilitating people in the same room in harsh political climates and trying to help them agree on what values do they share, what end goal are they trying to get to, and what are the ways that they could get there. Whether that is reuniting a screaming parent and children or a crying child and parent, or vice versa, we've kind of done it all. We know Tabor, we know the restrictions that you all have to operate under, and we know the differences and the purposes that bring. Sometimes you want to bring to the table symbolism. Sometimes you want to bring to the table hard data and metrics, and there's absolutely a place for both of those. We have a lot of communications background and public engagement background, and think that we can be a real asset to you as you embark on this process in, I hate to use the word unprecedented because we've all heard it too many times, an unprecedented year with many challenges. But we are your local team here, and have really made it a purpose in our lives and our professional lives to work on with folks across the political spectrum to solve real problems. And no local government is without problems these days, thanks to a pandemic and an economic crisis and all kinds of other related issues going back from this year to the founding of our country. So with that, I'll let Brenda introduce herself, and then Chris.
Hello, finally figured it out. Nice to see you all today. I'm Brenda Morrison. My partner and I, Chris Adams, we've been around, we're Colorado natives. So we're probably the only 3 people who are Colorado natives who work together. But we've known Sarah, she said, for about 15 years. But we had a company, Engage Public, that specialized in bringing, to be honest, just kind of closing the gap between residents and policy. And that's what we've spent many years trying to figure out the best ways to do that, from in-person meetings to online, which is here we are right now, to online methods. And I think Sarah included what Chris and I do right now in terms of Balancing Act and how we've thought to integrate that into our public engagement practice. But we're delighted to be here with you today, and we're just a few miles down the road in Denver. So nice to see you.
Yep, and I'm Chris Adams, and I'm president of Balancing Act and Engage Public, and have been doing public engagement, public policy consulting, strategic planning for, about 2 decades. Most recently, we've been focusing on the importance of including the budget in policy and planning discussions, just realizing how critical that is, especially in an era of challenged economic forecasts for local governments. And we are here to provide support to Sarah and also to bring a really nice facilitation tool for budgets and planning as useful. And we actually did work for the city, a number of years ago with a previous platform. It's gotten so much better since then, and so much more flexible, easy to use, flexible, can be used in face-to-face settings, synchronous and asynchronous, real time, as well as just having it online. It's a great way to gather informed input from residents, and that's provides context and shows consequences, and also shows constraints. We're keenly aware of some of the financial constraints of local governments in Colorado due to Tabor and other constitutional constraints, and that's something that we'd certainly take into account. And since Sarah gave her Westminster bona fides, I'll just say that my aunt and uncle are both 97, and they are, I think they've lived in Westminster since about 1955, and I've been going to visit them since about 1970. So we know your city and care about it a great deal.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I'm going to start off with the first question, although I think you've answered it to some degree. But so take this opportunity to either reiterate or expand. Briefly describe your strategic plan development process and the final product. How do you get the ideas, goals down to a prioritized list?
Well, that process is designed collaboratively. I think the first step would probably be meeting between project managers, between Cody and I, to talk through all the things that didn't make it into the RFP or the addendum, and all the things you'd like us to know. When I've worked with other local governments, that's where the city staff leadership is really saying, here's what we're hearing from council and what we'd like to solve. In one case, a group I worked with said, our elected officials, despite different political leanings, are getting along fabulously. They actually are all very much on the same page. We need to help them narrow down all the projects they want to do because they have these huge dreams. I've had other groups say, we could use the equivalent of marriage counseling to start us off. I had another city say, it was more of a staff-driven process. We brainstormed dozens and dozens of goals and objectives. We need help getting them into some sort of thematic order and figuring out ways that departments can collaborate together. One of my favorite examples of that would be they had an intersection where they had a lot of traffic crashes. And the police department had brought this to their attention, and their solution was, we should write more speeding tickets. And instead of just making that a singular police department goal, we got other departments involved, the equivalent of community planning, community development, public works and utilities, and said, what if we started looking at not just writing tickets, but redesigning this intersection in a way that discourages speeding, and that we're taking away the root cause rather than writing the ticket after the fact. So we would really start with listening, meeting of the project managers. If Cody recommended some one-on-one or small group interviews, we could do that. really it would depend on what you all were looking for and what your needs are.
Thank you. Councilor DeMont?
So my question is actually a three-part question. So describe how you view the role of the consultant in strategic plan development process. What aspect of the strategic plan process do you allocate to governance and council protocol discussion, formulation, and check-in? How do you facilitate differing opinions or priorities and still develop a strategic plan and/or governance protocols that city council can be unified behind?
I'll take the first one and then group the other two together, I think. My role as your facilitator would be to help you and listen to each other, to help ensure that you're getting out of the process what you want, and to help you meet your goals and timelines. And I don't have all the answers to my questions from the RFP, so I can't exactly answer your question of what do you all want and how we would get there until we had some more meetings and interviews. But my role isn't to tell you what to do. It's to help you all get to where you want to go. And if what you're saying is we want some type of document that shows who we are as a body, how we're going to work together, what we want to achieve, what we want living in this city and working in this city to be like in a year or 5 years. I know in the past you've done 20-year visioning. So that's one thing we would talk about is what time periods do we want to look at here? Are we still living kind of year to year? Are we looking at a 2-year budget like you have traditionally? Where do you want to go there? And it would really be based on your needs, how much time we would spend on the governance piece of things. After the attacks on the US Capitol, I saw the statement that your council put out. So it's clear to me that you can find common ground on things. So I don't know how much governance work you're going to want, but that can certainly be at the top of our agenda if that's the highest priority for you. And then in terms of facilitating different opinions, I moderated something called America in One Room for the Stanford Center for Deliberative Democracy last year. And this was perhaps America's largest focus group. They brought 500 people across the country, across the political spectrum, representing every geography, economic status. They truly were a representative sample of America. And I moderated a group of 11 folks from across the political spectrum. And they came out agreeing on a lot of things as it related to federal policy at the end of this weekend. And I've seen with my own eyes that it's possible that when people decide to be a part of something in good faith and not just sling talking points at each other, but actually listen to each other, that people with differing opinions, with different life experiences can absolutely find common ground. And I was really heartened by that experience and excited to do more of that.
Great, thank you.
Please share your views with respect to the value or lack of value of long-term consultant-client relationships when it comes to strategic planning.
It depends. Well, my corporate motto, so to speak, is I work with people I like and respect on causes I support. That tends to lead me working with the same people multiple times over the years on different projects. I try and get Chris and Brenda in my life whenever possible. And we've worked together on Balancing Act. I've been part of the Bighorn Leadership Program. I'm now helping Brenda facilitate a youth advisory council for the Colorado legislature. So I think there's great value in long-term relationships when people share similar goals and have the right skill sets for that particular project.
Thank you.
I apologize, I was writing down notes, sorry. I've got the next couple questions for you. It's a two-parter. So the first part is, what is your process and or timeline for developing and delivering follow-up materials to the strategic planning session with City Council? How do you assure that the city's expectations will be met and that the materials are distributed in a timely fashion? That is, that we're shooting for the end of March.
You all have a natural timeline already built into a lot of your system that we would work with. The deadlines by which materials are due for the council packets, times that public notices need to be given for meetings, that sort of thing, print deadlines for the Westminster window. So first would be getting a detailed understanding of where all those are, and then we would work to slot in each piece of the work and ensure that we had not only calendared out our different retreats and workshops or public engagement sessions if we were doing those, but also making sure that we knew any printed or graphic designed or press release, any materials that needed to come out, press advisories, and make sure that those were part of the timeline as well.
Thank you. So the second part of the question is, do you have the time and resources to do this work? Do you actually have the capacity, based on your workload and your and the time allowed?
We do. This came at a really nice time for us in between other projects.
Okay, I have the next question. So who will be actually working with the city throughout this process in retreats, meetings, and developing the actual strategic plan? And if, Sarah, if that is the three of you, that's great. If you could also distinguish the roles you would each play in that. Thank you.
So I'll be your project lead and your facilitator working on any of the retreats and workshops. I'll be helping advise on any communications needs that you have. I'm available if your comms office needed some support on, hey, could you write some template social media posts for us or some press advisories, that sort of thing. Chris and Brenda will be the leads on the balancing act piece, and I'm gonna throw it over to Chris to talk a little bit about how that works.
Well, I think once again, we'd need to learn a little bit more about what your objectives are and the things that you're trying to accomplish. But sort of harping back to a question, David, that you asked about overcoming disagreement and trying to build consensus. We built Balancing Act essentially because budgets are near impossible to talk about in a public context. It's kind of a mess. I mean, best case scenario is you get a PowerPoint with a lot of different graphs on it. Worst case, you have a hearing where 2 or 3 people show up and it's just not very useful. And so one of the things that we try to do is we try to provide an opportunity, and it sounds a little touchy-feely, but when it's data-based, I think it's especially useful to put people in your shoes. So we chose a simulation-based approach to building a facilitation tool for budgets, and so that's what we would be focusing on, is looking for opportunities to frame up at the right level of detail some of the big issues you all are looking at, some priorities, some directions, and to the degree that we can put some estimates of what kind of financial resources would be involved in that, we would be available to help with that. And Brenda, at some point you should say a little bit about what you're doing with Helena, because that also combines strategic planning, but sort of brings it full circle by using Balancing Act.
Yeah, so just in 30 seconds or less, you all probably know her. Rachel Harlow-Schock used to be in Westminster, and now she's the city manager in Helena, Montana. And I've met her actually when she was in Westminster, and she was working on recycling, and we helped her with her recycling project many years. That's how old I feel at the moment. Anyway, so when Rachel moved to Montana, she asked Chris and I to help. Even when I said, are you sure you want a Denver-based consultant? And she said, yep, further from Helena, the better. And I said, okay. So we're helping Rachel. She is also on a super compressed timeline, end of March timeline. And she basically needs to get some, to be honest, David, there's a city council that has some, she would be the first to say it, maybe some personality conflicts that are a bit overwhelming policy decisions at the moment. She's got that, but she's also trying to get them into some strategic outcomes, prioritizing strategic outcomes, and she wants to align those outcomes to the budget process all by the end of March. And so what we did is, to be honest, we interviewed all her city council members, not only about some of the softer side of interpersonal interactions, but about policies that they care about. And actually, they care about a lot of the same policies. And then we had a retreat just on Saturday where they outlined their top, not their top strategic outcomes and the focus areas under those outcomes. And now we're going back out to the public and we're going to communicate to the public, because this is not a 2-year strategic planning process. This is a 3-month strategic planning process. Communicating to the public about what do they think about those strategic outcomes? Are they on board? And just like you all, they know their community and they know what their community cares about. You all know your community. You know what your community cares about. Nothing's going to be like, oh my gosh, I didn't know. You all know. But the people are going to know that you heard them. And then we're going back and then we're going to hear from the community, and then we're going to use Balancing Act, and we're going to put those strategic outcomes into the simulation. We're going to push that back out into the community, see that they can say, gosh, I really want more we want more affordable housing, but if we want more affordable housing, this is what's going to happen. Either we can't afford it as it is right now, or we're going to have to do some taxes. They don't even have any sales tax there. It's really different. It's like, where does all the money come from? So we're doing all that, to be honest, by the end of March. And so it's a similar thing. It's a compressed timeline, but to be honest, we're able to do some by using online simulations, by having good retreats using the council's time wisely, doing some good environmental scans, some good core interviews with people like yourselves. We're going to get it done.
Yeah, and I'll just put a bow on that. But what we really try to do, and we've got some good ways of doing it using technology that are friendly in the era of COVID, of providing stakeholders with context, showing them consequences, but also requiring them to have the same constraints that you all have.
What I really love about Balancing Act, I call it a budget video game because it very much feels that way, with warnings popping up like Tabor warning. So many times we go out to our constituents and we ask them some question in a vacuum that doesn't take into account the larger context. Like, should we have better roads? Well, yeah, of course. Like if somebody asks me, do you want ice cream? Of course I'm gonna say yes. But if somebody says, all right, 1 scoop costs this much, 2 scoops cost this much, and if you eat that, maybe you can't eat this other thing because that's going to be too many calories for you today. That's the equivalent of Balancing Act. Like, okay, you want more library hours, cool. What are you willing to give up or trade off for that? And we're actually giving people real choices and helping them understand what you all have to deal with every day. That's not going to make them an expert, and they'll probably still claim that they could do your job and they pay your salary. But it's really helping bridge that divide and asking people real questions that aren't kind of just yes or no, or shall taxes be increased, yes or no.
Thank you. I also have a 2-part question. The first part is, what is your definition of a strategic plan?
I'll tell you what I think a good strategic plan is, because there are a lot of strategic plans out there that I've seen. The best one, I think, is one that gets used. And in Westminster, there is absolutely a culture of doing this. One has to look no further than the City Council agenda packets, where we see this item, this expense, this action speaks to strategic plan goals X or Y. And I love that. I love that you update it. It's not a plan that just sits on the shelf. It's something that your departments report on. It's available on the website. And I think that's the best type of strategic plan, is one that started with, here's who we want to be, and we're continuing to update you on how we're getting there.
Thank you. Can you, in addition to that, provide an example of tangible success of one of the communities or organizations you've worked with has had after you delivered their final strategic plan? what have those successes or examples of success looked like?
One of my favorite examples is Pueblo West Metro District, which is a really fascinating jurisdiction. Unlike a fire district or a library district, they are kind of combined. They do a number of things, including roads and fire service and parks and rec. And they're maybe looking to become a city, maybe not. So they're going to have a lot of big decisions to make over the next 5 and 10 years. But I've facilitated their council or elected officials board retreat 2 years in a row, as well as a staff retreat to put goals and objectives and interdepartmental collaborations to the big goals that the elected officials laid out. And I always like to start with values. And the very first session, elected staff, everyone, is what are the values that drive you to do this work? And what are our shared values that we have as a city? And you have that with City Spirit. So this probably won't be a long exercise for you all. But what came out of that for Pueblo West Metro District was collaboration, was their #1 value, both working together as a district, as the elected officials with the staff, with intergovernmental partnerships, with public-private partnerships. And I follow along with what's going on there and check their meeting agendas and the Pueblo Chieftain news stories from time to time, and correspond with the district manager there. And I'm really proud that I was able to help facilitate them coming to that as a core value, because so many of the votes they've taken as a board have been unanimous, because they're able to listen to each other and talk to each other and find that common ground. And they referred ballot measures. Everything this board has been doing has been very collaborative, not only in the way they work together, but in the way they're working with others. So I'm really proud of how we started their strategic planning process with values, and that those values are continuing to guide them.
Thank you. The next question is more for the city panel, and if there's any follow-ups or items that weren't covered yet that folks have a question about. Councilor Smith, I see you're late.
Thank you. The budget that you provided, it seems like most of you are local in Colorado, but does the budget include any kind of in-person meeting?
I didn't get a strong sense from the RFP and from the way you've been meeting that there is a desire for in-person meetings. But if that is something that you want, we can certainly figure it out.
Okay, thank you.
And we're all local, so no plane tickets or anything needed.
Any other questions?
If there's no other follow-up questions, I'll go ahead and ask the final question. So this is really a wrap-up. Your value proposition. Why should we work with you?
My hometown advantage, I certainly think, is something to be considered. But as a lifelong Nuggets fan, I can say that just being the local team doesn't win you games. What we can bring to the table, I think that maybe no other facilitator or strategic planning consultant that is in this process is that we are policy experts. We understand the landscape that you operate in. We're experts in bringing together people across the political spectrum to find common ground and understand that nonpartisan local government does still not operate in a vacuum outside of the larger political world that we live in. And we're budget dorks. We will talk Tabor with you. We will nerd out with you about the different mixes of sales and property tax. We are here for all of that. And we strongly believe that budgets demonstrate values. And we would love to not just be on contract with you through March, but be helping you prepare for your budget process and helping you live your values through that.
Great, thank you. The only other items are just the process itself. So we have one more interview. There were 6 total today, and then the counselors will discuss if they're ready to make a recommendation to their colleagues, and they'll either do that this evening or ask staff to do some additional work, in which case a recommendation would come forward to council the following Monday on February 1st. So you'll hear from us either way sometime by the early part of next week at the latest.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. It's
Thank
nice
you very
talking to you all.
much. Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thank you. Good luck to you. Long day, I'll bet.
Yes. Thank you for joining us. Have a
Thank
nice
you.
afternoon.
Thank you.
And city team, we have until 4:30, so we got a little bit extra space there. If you wanna, I don't know, go have a snack, check emails, whatever you need to do. We have a few extra minutes. So thank you.